The mayor has called the council meeting to order. Mayor Davey.
Here.
Councilmember Laredo.
Here.
Councilmember London. Councilmember McCormick.
She will be delayed.
Vice Mayor Moss.
Here.
Councilmember Petros.
Here.
And Councilmember Segurola.
Here.
We do have a quorum, Mayor. With us this evening is a father from the St. Agnes Catholic Church. If we may please rise.
God of justice and mercy, thank you for the gift of life and the opportunity to serve your people. Help us to act with character and conviction. Help us to listen with understanding and goodwill. Help us to speak with charity and restraint. Give us a spirit of service. Remind us that we are stewards of your authority. Guide us to be the leaders your people need. Help us see the humanity and dignity of those who disagree with us, and to treat all persons, no matter how weak or poor, with the reverence your creation deserves. And finally, Father, renew us with the strength of your presence and the joy of helping to build a community worthy of the human person. We ask this as your sons and daughters, confident in your goodness and love. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Father.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you, Father.
Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item, Mayor, is brief comments by council.
Thank you all for coming. I had, a few things. First, Winterfest. Want to thank Todd. I want to thank Mary Tague, Dr. John Martin, and Robert DeZuglu for Winterfest. It was incredible. Well done. I think it looks spectacular over here in our Civic Center, so I appreciate what everybody's been commenting on it. Great tree. So thank you for that. Number two, thank you to the folks who came out for the volunteer appreciation on Thursday night. I thought it was a great event. Thanks for everybody. Sorry we missed a couple of you, but I think it was really well done, and people who volunteer their time in this community, and y'all, whoever was there heard how many people I listed off. We have a lot of people who do a lot of voluntary actions in this community, and so thank you to them. And I'd like to see that continue year on year. And then finally, as we move into the holidays, I just want everybody to sort of take a moment and, the holidays can be tough for some people. And so if you see people who are kind of having a tough time, reach out. I think it's important. There's a lot of people who go through a lot of difficulties during the holidays. So if you see somebody who you think might be in trouble, who may be having a hard time, either reach out to them or reach out to professionals and just try and get them the help that they need, because these can be trying times. So that's what I have to say. Any other comments? Okay.
Next item, Mayor, is agenda approval, deferrals, additions, deletions, substitutions, withdrawals.
I think we have a few.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to withdraw item 8D, and I'd like to withdraw item 11D1.
11
Okay.
D1. Sorry. Okay.
Sorry, what was the last one?
11D1.
That's the dates for the the police policy and procedure town hall.
Sorry,
I think
okay.
that'll come out as a product of our discussion on the meeting dates. And then
I'd like to remove my item on discussion items 11A5.
right, okay.
And I'd like to remove 11A4.
11.
I'm sorry, wrong one. Which one is it?
A3, the stormwater question for the AG.
No.
6. Waste management?
Yes, waste management. Thank
Waste
you. I'm sorry.
management. Okay. Oh, all right.
6.
A6, which is waste management. Anybody want to add anything? I'm liking the way we're going tonight. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, Mayor, is public comment.
Okay. First public comment, Bill Durham.
Bill Durham, 230 Seaview Drive. I just wanted to take just a minute to give my experience of attending the State of the Village and the Volunteer Appreciation Night. It was really a nice address that you gave, Mayor, and kind of highlighted the events and issues we're facing over the next year. And I was really impressed with the volunteer appreciation part of the agenda. You know, I'm on a newly appointed to a committee, and I knew my committee was going to be there, and I figured there would be 3 or 4 other, maybe 5 committees there. But there was 170 volunteers. I recommend it, appreciated at that event. And I think that's really a testament to our village, that people want to get involved and help. And I liked the Father's invocation tonight where he said, guide us to speak with kindness and understanding. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Francis Reeves.
Oh, and second?
And Mary Tague.
We're last.
Do you want to be last?
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Well, you know, we sort of want to echo what Bill just talked about.
State your names, please, for the record.
Oh, Mary Tague, 610 North Masha.
Francis Reeves, 251 Crandon Boulevard.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome.
But I sort of felt moved, just like Bill did at Volunteer Night, after accepting the volunteer award for Mary and I. And it also occurred to me, since Mary and I are never thanked, it also occurred to me that you guys are never thanked. So we kind of thought it would be a good idea to thank you, not only for your service to this village, for putting on the volunteer night, but to also supporting us at Key Biscayne Car Week.
Yep, we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, and before I do, I had one major omission on volunteer night. Manny Rionda, who does a lot in this community, I totally missed him, and a lot of people can blame him for getting me involved in youth sports and doing damage to people's baseball skills, because he made me, after I ran the first time, he challenged me to help manage a T-ball team. So I want to reach out and say, I want to say thank you to Manny for everything he's done in youth sports, as well as the Philibag program. Ceci Sanchez. Ceci? Who's she yelling at out there?
I just want to say thank you, Ceci Sanchez, 260 Cypress Drive. It's the most beautiful display for Christmas.
Yeah.
It's the center of town. I think it's gorgeous. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's nice.
Don Ellisberg.
Donald's here.
Good evening, everybody. Mr. Mayor, council members, Madam Manager, and Madam Clerk. I'm Don Ellisberg. I reside at 177 Ocean Lane Drive, which is the Commodore Club East condominium. I am here tonight, which I'd like to make clear, representing only myself. I am not representing any organization, and I am here because of my concern as a property owner in Commodore Club about the issue that is before you with the requested Attorney General's opinion on whether or not you can use public funds to assist in maintaining these stormwater systems that were initially installed by the developers in the condominiums. I'm here because I have been at this for about 7 years in various capacities, and I have yet to be comfortable with the dialogue. I want to just say that, in the first place, this next year in this new tax bracket the multifamily dwellings, okay, regardless of whether they have their own systems or not, will contribute $1,207,674 approximately to this fund, which is more than double what they had been contributing for the last 26 years. It's a lot of money. I think we made clear that the way in which the determination was made is an example of why I am concerned over the process of dealing with public works in this town and the lack of involvement of any citizens. But more importantly, I want to support Councilman Segarola's proposal because I think it represents an effort to look at these big-ticket, all-village items in an entirely different fashion. I think there is an effort to look at this. This will start an effort to look at this not as a we-they, not as a we-they, but as an us. And since the mess or the disappointing result of the underground effort, okay, for which everybody can have a piece of the action, it became clear that understanding how these big systems are going to work in a village like ours has not been clear to anybody, whether it's the residents or the managers. They're just not right. I have, and I'll just finish this way. We have a long way to go in discussing this issue, but I have concluded, and I have studied this thing, and it's reflected in this draft proposal, that this is not a we-they situation. This is an us. That all of these so-called stormwater systems in each of these properties are integral to the effective operation of the stormwater utility systems, the utilities in the village of Key Biscayne. Tomorrow morning, if you didn't have these stormwater facilities in the condos across the beach, you would have, in a huge rain or a storm or a surge, you'd have a lot of water sitting over on Fernwood, more than there is, all right? They all play into each other, and the documentation of how this was done is very clear that it was all part of a complementary system. And in order to get the ability to look at it as a partnership, public-private partnership, you've got to get the government to recognize that there is a public purpose. And the only reason I'm here today is to try to make that point for all of your consideration.
Thank you, sir.
Okay? Here, I assumed you would have all these questions.
Not during public comments. Mayor Vernon.
Good evening. Robert Vernon, 475 Ridgewood Road. I'm here on behalf of the Grand Bay Master Association regarding the Crandon Boulevard Safety Study. I just want, we've met with the mayor, with Councilman Laredo. Love to meet with any of you separately at your convenience regarding what's going to happen in front of Grand Bay and the Ritz-Carlton. There's approximately 240 condominiums, 350 room hotel, a beach club, and 50 single family residences. People cross there daily, will continue to cross there daily with or without crosswalks. And we are looking for some sort of a pedestrian safety crossing, whether it's the lights, whether it's a traffic light. I know we looked into that many years ago, eliminating left turns in certain areas, enforcing non-left turns in other areas. There's a way to fix it, and we would like to be a part of the solution instead of a part of the problem. So in closing, just keep us in mind. I know this is a workshop. Nothing's been done. You're going to get a presentation tonight. We would like to be intimately involved in the decisions that you all make. And please keep us abreast. You can contact me. I think you all know how. And I would love to work with you and as the boards of the 5 tracks would like to, and help us solve the problem together.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Betty Sim Conroy. Councilmember Conroy.
Good evening. It's Betty Sim Conroy, 785 Crandon Boulevard, Key Biscayne. Tonight, I just felt I had to give my own little personal tribute to Sam Kissinger. As you all know, he was our first village manager, and he passed away, I think it was a week ago Friday. He was 85. He worked the day before he actually passed away. That's the kind of guy he was. Probably Councilman Laredo is the only one up here that really knew him. That's how old we all are. But anyway, a little bit of her history doesn't hurt anybody. It's hard to imagine how Key Biscayne looked in 1991 before incorporation. The median in Crandon Boulevard is owned by Dade County and had only dead trees on it as there was no watering system. The village green was an unmanicured tree farm. There was garbage on many swales. There was no tree line, there were no tree-lined streets. After heavy rains, children floated down the streets on makeshift boats. Catching tadpoles became a popular sport. Police and fire service was provided by Dade County, and we were treated as an afterthought. Zoning was decided by the Dade County Commission, which catered to the developers. When Sam Kissinger was hired to be our first village manager in March of 1992, this was the Key Biscayne he inherited. His challenge was to create a municipality literally from scratch. I attended a Dade County hurricane preparedness workshop with Sam in June 1992. He knew nothing about hurricanes and was shocked at what he saw. He was hoping a hurricane was an experience he would avoid. 2 months later, in August, Hurricane Andrew, a Category 5 storm, struck Key Biscayne with winds up to 175 miles per hour. Fortunately, Sam had been an assistant manager for 5 years and a city manager for 20 years, so he had the experience to stay calm and tackle these projects. He totally rose to the occasion. He had our island cleaned up in record time. He knew how to write contracts and get things done. The first council directed Sam to proceed with the purchase of the Reboso Tree Farm. As a brand new village with little in reserves, he negotiated the purchase. The village borrowed the $9.4 million to acquire it, and it was paid off in 10 years. Sam organized our first government and set up every department. He was a mentor to many who worked for him. Several are now working in other governments. 2 have become city managers. And our own Todd was actually hired by Sam. And I think he's the only employee that's still here that Sam did hire. He understood how the council manager form of government works and set very high standards. Sam loved sports. He loved baseball especially, and he and our village attorneys had season tickets to the Marlins game. Sam liked to have fun. Every year at Christmas, he had the council sponsor a fabulous Christmas party for the village, complete with food, drink, and music. Sam was a good friend. When I kept complaining about how disorganized I was, he had his wife, Eleanor, who was very organized, come over and try to help me. I won't discuss the results. In 1991, Key Biscayne was the first municipality to break away from Dade County since the Home Rule Charter was adopted in 1956. In great part due to Sam Kissinger's leadership, Key Biscayne became the role model for the many municipalities that followed us. Sam was our manager for the first 10 years of our existence. I feel like we owe him a debt of gratitude for establishing our foundation and starting us on a path toward excellence in government. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comments? Okay, we're going to close public comments.
Next item, Mayor, under special presentations.
Hold on, Councilmember Petros.
I apologize.
I'm sorry, I don't know where to add this, but I forgot to mention that both Councilmember Laredo and I attended the summit meeting down in Key West, and I want to do that as a
report
discussion.
on a discussion, add it as a discussion item, unless there's objection?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you.
Put on.
A5, 11A5.
Yeah.
Yep.
I apologize, Mayor, and if it's appropriate, if I can pull item 8A and defer it to the next
Right,
council
okay.
meeting.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Okay.
There's a minutes for October 29th meeting.
Next item, under special presentation, special recognition, Jose Yanes, Winn-Dixie General Manager, Councilmember Laredo.
Yes, I wanted to, as you know, and I use we because I include myself in it, over the last few years, even though we had a dream 28 years ago of creating this wonderful village, we sort of drifted into a little bit less than the niceness that we inherited before, and we're way now turning the corner and becoming Key Biscayne nice, and every once in a while we need to stop and recognize people that impact our lives, that make our lives in Key Biscayne wonderful and unique, and they're not necessarily residents. You know, we've had the Rickenbacker people, and today I think on behalf of all of us, I wanted to recognize, if you'll come up with his associate or supervisor, corporate, Juan Yanes, that led the, as you all know, the renovation of Winn-Dixie, which is a place where a lot of our communication takes place, and with your new design, with that entry area where we can sit and have coffee and stuff, hopefully will enhance the Key Biscayne spirit of togetherness and thankfulness. So I just thought it'd be appropriate on all our behalf if we recognize the wonderful work, and you can take this to corporate headquarters, that he does. He is a very special man. It was a very specially, efficiently converted and upgraded Winn-Dixie with minimum disruption, and he's always a gentleman and accessible, and the spirit of that, it permeates all of his staff. So I just, we prepared a little plaque that perhaps you can come up, both of you, with the mayor and us, and we can take a picture. Well, if somebody has a, yeah, I think, oh, downstairs?
Yeah, why don't we do it down below?
Okay.
That way we can get everything in the picture. I'm blocking it.
More money, we got
It's all about him. I'll take a picture. All of them.
Next item, Mayor, is a presentation by Joseph M. Cordino, the Cordino Group regarding pedestrian safety study for Crandon Boulevard.
Please. Thank you.
All right. Oh, that might have been, still. All right.
We have copies.
Yes, sir. Good evening. My name is Edward Ning. I'm with the Cordino Group. I am the Technical Vice President for the Planning Division. We're here at the request of the council today to provide a recap for the pedestrian safety study we completed last year, and appreciate the opportunity to present for you again this evening. In looking back at the study, we're going to look at, we're going to do a recap of what we did during the study involving the existing condition, or what our recommendation was, and what the cost of our recommendations are as well. We were asked at the last year to prepare a traffic engineering study to review pedestrian safety along the corridor and to provide recommendations for improvement. The purpose of the study was to provide a critical examination of pedestrian safety along Crandon Boulevard with respect to existing physical conditions to the corridor and to existing traffic control devices that we have. Here you see on the map are all the crash locations within a 5-year period. When we do run these studies, we look at the study area, which is defined as Crandon Boulevard, and we take existing data from SDOT on the incident that occurred as part of it. They limited the study with Crandon Boulevard from the tower crossing the south end to the Harbor Drive, Ocean Lake Drive at the north end. And along this route, there are 13 pedestrian crossings. 30,000 vehicles per day use the road at a speed limit of about 30 miles per hour. Just pretty decent congestion amount. When we conducted the study during July 2018, we identified the physical conditions along the corridor and included a in-depth field study. What you see right here are some of the items that we've noted. For example, we saw signs that were being obscured by the foliage. A sign doesn't really work if you can't see it. What you see on the right side in the image that's circled is there are people there, but if, this was taken from the viewpoint of a car. So, if you're driving along, this is what you're seeing. You can't really notice people. So from the viewpoint of safety, you have signs that are being blocked. You have people that aren't as visible. And we had to look at how we could provide recommendations for improvement on that. Look at the existing conditions. We look at when we do these studies, we typically look at a 5-year span. We take that data and see what has occurred in the 5-year period beforehand. And between the period of 2013 to 2017, there were 192 crashes within the village of Key Biscayne. 36 of those occurred involved pedestrians or bicyclists. And that means that about 19% of all crashes involve pedestrian or bicycles. Taking a step back then, what does it actually mean? It's a number. And well, we have an expectation that given the amount of traffic and the amount of people using the roadway, you expect that because of a variety of factors. There's an expectation for a certain number of crashes that may normally or regularly occur. And when you look at this, it should be about 1.4 a year. When we factor this out over the 5 years with 36 crashes, it's 7.2. So your frequency is actually about 5 times what it should be along this corridor. Taking that into account, we looked at potential solution. When we approach these studies, we look at the 5 E's: engineering, enforcement, education, encouragement, and evaluation. These all work in tandem because there's a limitation to how much you can do physically with the roadway to encourage certain behavior. Past that, you have to enforce the behavior using policing. You also have education, both on the driver's side and the pedestrian and bicyclist side in terms of their behavior. Part of this includes education of children as well. And looking at all of these all together, we looked at, from the engineering side, recommending a reorganization of the signage you have along Crandon, repositioning of some of the RFBs, which I was driving along today, and I was happy to see that when they were flashing, people did slow down and come to a stop at every location that I passed along the village. There's also a need to reconsider how many marked crosswalks that we have. There's a standard for that. Anything less than 600 feet in space between crosswalks might be a little too much. So we propose eliminating crosswalks at certain other locations as part of the report. We also recommended increasing a pedestrian head start and crossing time. What do we mean by head start crossing time? They're creating an additional lag between when the light turns and when the pedestrian light will start allowing someone to cross. They're looking at shortening pedestrian walking distances in some areas by widening curbs so that they don't have to walk as far. And in addition, lighting improvement, particularly for people who are walking along the corridor at night. On the enforcement side, we recommended looking at ways to reduce the speed limit, having zero tolerance enforcement policies, having an education program for street safety as part of an overall campaign that also includes encouragement, positive reinforcement. And of course, there needs to be regular monitoring of the progress and evaluation, continuous evaluation of this. The result of this study, we provided a Crandon Boulevard master sign plan, which recommended that along the corridor, certain signs be removed and other signs be retained. This was to reduce the visual clutter. This is important because as you're traveling along, imagine yourself as a motorist. You're driving along, you see one sign, you're reading it. You see another sign that's catching your attention, you're reading it. So with each successive one, you're looking at having to react to additional signs and processing that. And at the same time, also looking to see when people are crossing. So we want to reduce some of that clutter, so focus on the important aspect and also to redirect some of the attention that you need to direct as the driver toward the people riding their bicycles or crossing the roadway. In addition, while this was outside the study, we were also tasked at the time to look at potential other improvements along Crandon Boulevard. This includes the idea and concept of cycle tracks. Cycle tracks are protected bicycle lanes. They come in a variety of forms. They've been used very successfully in other cities. There are various methods of separation, and generally what it does is it creates a separate travel lane both directions for bicyclists. Generally, they're on one side of the road, and you can see here that is to and from on one side of the road. So at the time, we were tasked with looking at how this could fit along Crandon Boulevard. And while we could really, you can make anything fit with the right amount of engineering and the right amount of land. However, there are always trade-offs. And in this case, the trade-off where you had to give up certain aspects of your right-of-way, or in some scenarios, take additional land in order to make this work. So what we had said at the time in discussion with staff and with council at the time was, well, if the village isn't willing to do that, let's look at how we can enhance safety along the existing corridor through enhancement of the existing bicycle lanes. Here, as with the same rationale for removing the signage, we are looking at ways to enhance the visibility of people who would use the roadways. And this then involves ideas such as painting the bike lanes green so that as a driver, you have that visual cue to say, hey, this person, this is a place where a bicyclist may be using that track. Again, we also looked at finding ways to where we can lower the speed limit if possible. And this is extremely important because as you go with higher speeds, if a person is involved in a collision involving a vehicle at these different speeds, you'll see that the survivability rate is far lower, even with a 10-mile-per-hour difference. So a person being hit by a vehicle traveling at 20 miles per hour, they have a 90% survival rate. This drops to 50% when you go to 30 miles per hour and to 10% when you go to 40 miles per hour. So it's important that we look at the speed of the vehicles as well. It's something that they did in New York and other places that have provided for our Vision Zero initiatives. Vision Zero initiatives are those that are really geared toward reducing serious injuries or fatalities to zero. And the important part is it costs. when we take in all the different aspects, it will cost roughly about $1 million. A part of it does overlap with some of the projects that you have in safe routes to school, but we have treated it independently per our instructions from staff. From the basis of the report, to put in all the improvements, taking into account the engineering, mobilization, maintenance of traffic, and so forth, this here is our cost estimate. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions from the council.
Councilmember Lurie, you can start us off.
Thank you. By one of those coincidences, Jay and I spent about 3 hours or 4 hours after the conference with the Resilience and Offer in Key West. And we learned, first of all, I'm going to start with the conclusion and then go back to what because I want to separate cycling. They have in Key West, in Roseville Avenue, a pedestrian crossing that goes yellow to slow you down, then red, which is what people stop, and then back to yellow. In a previous discussion, then where the chief of police we exchanged views, he has restrictions because of a study, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I also learned from an enormous amount of county commissioners from the 4 counties that were there that they, like me, are what we call, they have study fatigue. I am fatigued with consultants and studies. My point specifically, and following up on Mayor Vernon's point, that intersection, particularly if you're aware of the entrance of Grand Bay, which also is a crossing point for all our children playing in the Village Green, it is an absolute disaster waiting to happen. And so we'll have, I guess we've had studies and say that it doesn't justify a light, but my input or reflection with you is we're going to have to take this and go straight to the political leadership in the county, because we just keep studying things, and the yellow crossings that we have, our people are not respecting them as much as they should, because yellow in our driving mentality is slow down, and some people don't slow down. Red is something you take attention to, and I was very, very pleased to see another municipality with a lot more traffic, which is Roseville Avenue around Key West, are able to get the approval to have red lights for crossing. So, I mean, just food for thought. This intersection, and we have other problems in your study, and I'm not going to talk about bicycling because right now one of my best friends is sitting in the audience, and he's a bicyclist fanatic. But I separate bicycling from pedestrian, particularly concerned about children in this intersection, and the fact that kids are crossing all over. And now that they cross with those little scooters, that sometimes they're so low. Right. I know that maybe I'm wrong, but and we haven't had a major thing there, which is thank God. But it just seems to me that we have to do something to there's a possibility of no left.
Yeah, we've had children struck. I think
what I'm saying is politically we need to figure out a way to.
Well, that's the discussion up here. I agree.
The bureaucracy.
I agree with you. I just had a couple of questions. Do you know when we get to your point? Do you know when we did install the flashing lights? Because I see it's interesting. We had 3 accidents involving pedestrians and/or bicycles in 2013, and then they kind of spiked. When did we install our flashing lights? Do you remember?
We installed flashing lights in the village. I believe the first one went in about 2015 or 2016. The other 2 were not installed at that time, but installed at a later date as part of the master planning for the boulevard.
All right. And I guess I talked to Joe Cordino earlier today. We finally connected. And one of the things he was to the point about the traffic light is that we would have to go through, I guess they call it a signal warrant analysis that we'd have to go through. There's 12 warrants that we'd have to go through that process to attempt to get a traffic light in that spot. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
You have to hit a certain amount of points within, and there are very specific criteria. It's a very objective look rather than a subjective look in order to see what can be done from an engineering standpoint.
Okay. And then to your point about the bike lanes, would you recommend that we install green bike lanes? where we are? And if so, what would be you mentioned there might be some trade-offs. What would be the potential trade-offs if we were to do the green bike lanes?
Well, you currently have bike lanes. As a professional, I believe that I've seen it work in other places because of the enhancement in visibility. I believe that it will work here. When I wrote the transit master plan, that was a consideration. And it is a low cost, but in other places it has been very effective, a way to enhance safety by increasing the visibility of the bicyclists. In terms of how it would apply here, it really depends on the method and the type that you go with. When we look at bicycle infrastructure, there are a variety of different means that it can be done. When we even talk about bike lanes, there are bike lanes, and then there are bike lanes with 3-foot safety buffers. And even with those safety buffers, we have differences. We have them with poles. We have those with concrete blocks. We have those with those little, they look like little armadillos on the ground. Right. Perhaps you've seen them. They all cost very differently, and they all have different effects. The key there for some of that is really looking at existing driver behavior as well. We think about how drivers react when we see a curve. You know, you think you're going to damage your car, you're going to go 4 feet above the ground. Which is why, you know, people avoid driving on the curves. So when we think about items like that, and we go back to what the design should be, we look at how we separate this, what the type is. And when you settle on the type, that's when you look at the, or even before you settle on the type, you look at the trade-off. Because you have existing bicycle lanes, if you were just to paint them green, right, you wouldn't have to redesign the roadway because you already have an existing facility with adequate width for the bicycle lane. Now, if you wanted to add a buffer zone,
no, I'm just talking about if we just made them green,
yes,
you think that's an effective way of sort of assisting with, say, bicycle safety interaction with vehicles?
Yes, okay. And it wouldn't cost much because the primary cost there is the cost of paint.
We can get some cheap paint.
We have a grant.
Right. We also.
Well, you have $300,000 in here.
That was for a cycle-track option that we were asked to present.
I think that's beyond. Yeah, I don't think we'd have to pay $300,000 in paint. But and then finally on the reducing of the speed limit, I'm really intrigued by that because I've always been told that we couldn't reduce the speed on on Crandon Boulevard because it's a county road. But would it be possible to get them to? I mean, in your opinion, would that be something we could possibly do?
This is something that the other cities have been looking at as well. You are correct, Mr. Mayor, in that it is resulting from a county ordinance. However, this is where you have to provide the resolution and meet with the commissioner and provide for that exception. And you have to really do what some of the other cities are doing and really take this issue to the commissioner and say, well, for our village, we want this difference. And we want the difference because it is a safer alternative. There's really not much around it because the county has to grant that exception or change its rules. We are providing this recommendation because you need these sort of studies to back you up at the council. Say, we had a professional engineering firm come in and tell us this is the right thing to do, and we at the council support making our streets safer, and we ask that the county do the same. And that would be how you might approach such an issue.
And we do have a representative for our Commissioner Suarez here, and I appreciate you being here. Just to be clear, that was my question. That's not, the council has not made that decision, but I appreciate you taking notes on it. Does anybody else have questions? Councilor, Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I think that it's definitely a combination of not just the engineering, but the enforcement, the education. I think is a huge part of this. I agree with Councilmember Laredo 100% that I believe, and what you were saying is right, that if you put a red light there, it does make a safe passage for people to cross. I know there are some challenges. I've talked to Chief Press about it, but I definitely don't like the red light that's in Brickell. There's a crossing walk on Brickell Avenue that blinks and then is solid, and then you don't know what it's doing, then it's blinking, and people don't know if this is a stop sign, and people just don't know what to do. It's just go yellow, go red, hold it for red, let people cross, and then go back to green and let people go again, or whatever, flashing yellow. So I do agree with that. The other thing that came up, which was kind of interesting, and this actually, I think all of us are aware of it, and it actually came up in the youth council that we had one of the discussions that one of the children brought up, which was very interesting. And I think that, 90% of the blame is on driver behavior, but there's also crossing behavior, pedestrian behavior too, that when somebody hits that yellow light, and I'm teaching my kids, just because you have a blinking yellow light, you don't just immediately start walking. You wait, you look at the people in the eyes, then you start crossing. You don't cross looking at your phone the whole time. And I watch it happen all the time, waiting at the light. I'm like, thank God everybody stopped. But if somebody blew through this, just because they're distracted, it could be a mess. I mean, you need to take that responsibility that you're also crossing a street at the same time. You need to be very aware of your surroundings. So that's part of the education to make this pedestrian safety really work. So we got to look at both the pedestrians and the drivers and both their behaviors and educate them.
Councilmember Petros.
In your opinion, given the study you've done with the intersection coming in and out of Grand Bay, would we qualify to have a stoplight there?
Without looking at a signal warrant analysis and having that completed, I can't give you a professional opinion on that matter. What I would recommend is that is a technical question that the village wants answered, that it conduct a signal warrant analysis of that intersection.
Are we the ones that are responsible to conduct the analysis, or does the county do it at our request because we're concerned about that intersection?
That is a good question. It can go both ways. We work with communities where, for example, in Palmetto Bay, there are county road items, but the village initiated it and funded the study because they felt that it was something that the village should be tackling. And then we would work together with the village and the county in that regard. It is within the village limits, and normally you would do these items as part of if new development came in, for example, and you were trying to evaluate the impact and have developer pay for additional signal, but this isn't the case here. Right. It is a county state road. The village can ask for the county to fund such a study, but it would have to go in the queue, and you have to see when the county would fund it versus their other priorities.
How much would a study cost approximately, if you could give a rough estimate of a signal warrant?
That I would have to ask my engineer for,
okay.
But specific to your intersection, particularly since we have to look at what's existing, and you have multiple intersections that are in really close proximity to each other.
Okay.
What is the recommended distance between crosswalks? Is it the 600 feet that you have listed here?
It's about 600 feet. One of the reasons why in the report we recommend the removal of some crosswalks was because they are very short distance to each other.
Which is a problem.
It can go both ways on that.
Right, but yeah. I guess my concern, and when I was out there with the mayor and some residents from Grand Bay, and we literally saw 8-9-year-old girl on a scooter. She went flying out of Grand Bay, and I mean, it was like she was playing Frogger. She just went, she got herself across. My concern would be you take out that crosswalk, unless you put up some way to impede or prevent them from going across. They're going to go across there, right? If the kids are coming out of Grand Bay, yes, they're going to tell their parents they're going up to the light, because we were all children and we all told our parents, we always promised our parents, but they're going to go across. So my first reaction would be, let's work for the traffic light. Then if we can't get that, let's work for a light that is better, a traffic signal for pedestrians, then maybe go to taking out the crosswalk. I just don't see it as a realistic option. We can take it out, but I don't know.
Can you explain, because I've never had a good understanding of why in our lighted, the ones that we have crosswalks with the lights, that we have two that are right next to each other in two locations on Crandon. And I know the county required that, but it seems to be counterintuitive to what you're telling me, because we literally have them like on either side of a street. And instead of people having to focus on one as a driver, you have to look and try to figure out which crosswalk someone's actually in when those lights are going.
If I could clarify the question, do you mean...
For example, right across from the center of Village Green.
Yes.
We have two crosswalks on either side of the street.
North and south.
And the north and south, and they're probably 15 feet apart from each other. And the lights work whether you're on one crosswalk or the other. It's almost treated as one giant crosswalk, but it's not. So why does it exist? Why was that considered a safe design?
Good question. I'm not, disclaimer, I'm not an engineer by trade. I'm an urban planner. I do know that when we look at how they are designed and required, and go through the process of approval, there are certain design requirements within the engineering manuals, and that's how that design comes about. From a more practical standpoint, when we look at why we might have it on both sides, you got person looking in one direction and someone coming the other direction. Their eyes aren't always in the middle of the road. They're scanning to the left and to the right. To the left and to the right, sorry. And when you think about that from the viewpoint of the driver, you have one that's way far here, and you're focused on the left side, and you're going at a certain speed. You might not necessarily catch the one over to your right. That's one way of looking at it. But in terms of why they're installed the way they are, we really just have to go back to the fact that it is a design requirement.
I had one other question, which is, did you ever analyze the idea of traffic circles anywhere along Crandon, and would those be helpful?
We had considered it at the entrance intersection, specifically Harbor and Crandon. It may be helpful, but to put the traffic circle in requires some innovation to be done in order to make it fit correctly with the amount of lane that you have and the traffic that you have. In addition, you have to consider that most of the traffic circles that we have within the county, when you drive them, particularly, I'll give them an example, the Old Cutler Road, if you've been to Cutler Bay, they have a series of traffic circles, and they've done a great job of moving the traffic along further, particularly since that road is failing from a level of service standpoint. That had one lane. People don't get confused. When people try to navigate the traffic circle, for example, at Coco Plum, for whatever reason, because we're in Miami, we have a lot more confusion with some of the drivers, and that's something that we have to consider as well, even though from a design standpoint and an engineering standpoint, and so many other case examples from across the country, say, these are safer. In Carmel, Indiana, they saw a massive drop in crashes because of how the traffic circles were designed and how people reacted to them. But that's Indiana, and their drivers are a lot different than here in Miami.
Okay.
Councilmember Segurola.
I guess my question builds on what was already asked. I think the idea of getting a traffic light here might be a little difficult, but I like the idea of having one of the yellow blinking lights. But as Councilmember Petros just pointed out, we have two side by side, 20 feet apart, and I think they operate independently. They don't operate.
No, one goes off. If you hit either button,
it's the other one closer
the
to the
one at the Winn-Dixie.
independent.
That's where it gets a little weird.
Okay, yeah, those work independently. Now, how much easier would it be, if at all, to put the blinking yellow lights at this intersection instead of a traffic light, number one? And number two, what would be the process, or is there even a process, in order to clean up all this clutter that we have, as the council member just pointed out, to make it a better flowing system with 3 blinking yellow lights? Those are my questions. And actually, before you answer, I just want to give an aside. I like the idea of painting the lanes green. I think visually, and I've seen it on the causeway, I think just seeing it different creates a little more awareness. And I'll take it one step further. I like the idea of having some sort of something blocking between the driving lanes and the bike lanes, even if it's the little armadillos, whatever you call them, to create that impediment. I think whatever you can do to separate the bicycles and the cars is a goal I would like to see. So I guess back to my questions then. regarding the yellow lights. Can we go down that route?
Well, it also depends on the condition of place as well. At the location in question, which is like right outside here, you also have your fire department trucks. So when you go to county for approval, they take into account all these other additional quality of place items there. Whether or not it's going to be easier to switch that over, I haven't personally evaluated that as a separate question, so I can't speak to it. We can go back and take a look and see what alternatives there are and provide that back to the village manager for distribution to the council. But at this time, I cannot give a professional recommendation on that.
But something you could look at.
Definitely something that can be evaluated.
Thank you.
Councilmember McCormick and then
I apologize if you already spoke about this. I was late, but the light, speaking of the firehouse, the light that stays green all the time unless the fire trucks are exiting. I've seen other places where that is a yellow or even a flashing yellow until it's activated for the fire department to come out. And we've had some near misses at the intersection that comes, if you're headed north on Crandon, the intersection that comes just after it at McIntyre, because you're driving up and it's a little bit of a curve and you can't see the second light, the active real traffic light yet. And you drive up and you just see the green light in front of the fire department. Is there a reason why it has to be green all the time as opposed to the flashing yellow that turns to red when it's activated?
I think that's something that we'll have to bring back to the county, the folks who regulate the traffic control devices within the village. It's certainly a good and a valid question. There may be some specific to why they put that in the first place. That would be the condition of the development order for the fire station itself. But we'll have to actually go and do more research on that.
Because when you come up, you have green, so you're cruising, and then all of a sudden you stop when the next light is red. The angle of the light and the angle of the road.
The way it's angled, it's almost invisible until you're on it. And so that's an interesting point. I'd forgotten that. Councilmember Laredo?
Yeah, I've learned that the highest level of intelligence is common sense. So and this study fatigue has had me fatigued. And you know this intersection. By the way, to clarify, I'm advocating some action, and it has to do with the crossing, pedestrian crossing. I'm not ready today to talk about a light because that's more complicated as I understand it. But you've seen this intersection. If you sit there, if I sit 10 common people, watch the traffic and pedestrian crossing, including people making a left into an area that are not supposed to make a left. Does your common sense, because you talked about objective criteria, whatever that is another study. It seems to me that this particular transaction, this particular intersection, and thank God for a stricter traffic control enforcement that our police department is doing now, I think has mitigated the possibility of a catastrophe. But to me, it's just a catastrophe waiting to happen. And children, we need to educate them, et cetera, but children will be children. And I wonder if you can step out of the so-called objective criteria in your common sense view, if you sat there for an hour or two, that needs some correction.
I would say I've been working with the village since about 2013. And actually, during the transit master plan, one of the things I brought up in a presentation before the council was a video that we took. We dropped a GoPro to the car, and we stuck it on top of, and we sat at the intersection and waited for the light to turn. And we used that video to observe what was happening. I think that when we look at just one particular aspect of safety, yes, there are a whole slew of things we could be doing, and there may be study fatigue.
Can you answer my question about this? Forgive me for interrupting. I'm a little impatient. My question was not about another study, not about facility. If you're sense, having been there, and the mayor was there, and I've been there watching. I wasn't able to meet you that day does it tell you that this is, in your professional opinion, that this is something that looks, with the intelligence of common sense, something is going to happen there because of the people flow, including the children? Irrespective of another study, if you feel comfortable with answering him, because I think we need to take some political action, and your boss or partner is himself an elected official, and I think we need to, as a council, we need to take action. So my question very precisely is, do you think that this crossing needs a better pedestrian crossing with lights in red? And I mentioned earlier that Key West has red as well as yellow.
If I may, Council Member Laredo, within the study itself that we presented, there are a series of already actionable items, and this includes a review of the intersection that you've had described and question. Between the anecdotal aspect with the looking at the video and being there in person, and looking at it from a professionally as well, we have provided a series of recommendations, and where we can proceed at the village is to take those recommendations, those specific action items, and move on them. And that should,
You can't answer my question. You're not prepared to answer my question, right?
He's provided suggestions or recommendations with regard.
I'm asking you specifically if you feel comfortable. That I think that if you set a sample 10 citizens using common sense without engineering and object, that this is forget about the rest of your study. That this intersection, because it is big population on one side and all our children playing across the street, one that needs special attention.
Yes.
For the corridor, entire
Is it yes or no?
Of course, we.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Petros.
Okay, a couple of things. Listening to the discussion, I know your report recommended that we eliminate the crosswalk there for the reasons that he's mentioning. And I think one of the things we're saying here is we may not be comfortable just eliminating the crosswalk, because that may make things more inherently dangerous, because people may cross there anyway. They're not necessarily going to go to the right place. Just 1 minute, please. I also have had a conversation with our chief of police, who has told me this intersection is the #1 dangerous spot on Crandon Boulevard. So I'm hearing solutions, which is potentially to talk to the county about getting an actual stoplight, going and trying to get a blinking pedestrian stoplight. What I would like to ask all of us, and maybe you have a recommendation of how can we do a short-term, immediate remedy to try to make this safer now. We need a short-term solution and a long-term solution. Right. So what would be your short-term recommendation that may not be what you said in this study, which is just to eliminate the sidewalk, or the crosswalk, excuse me?
On the spot, outside the study, if you were to, we often talk about removing crosswalk, but we talk about just removing the crosswalk. We don't talk about the fact that you have to put it in conjunction with something else. Like, for example, you see in New York, the crosswalks have the barriers in some areas. The easiest solution, because it is a county road, and one of the things that you have to run it through the DPW, and that is a long process, is remove the crosswalk, put up a barrier. That is your quickest short-term solution. Remove the crosswalk, put up a barrier. The signal warrant analysis may be quick from an analytical standpoint, but then you have to run it through the chain of different people and set up the meeting with multiple agencies of jurisdiction, and that's when the process becomes a lot more drawn out.
Where's the barrier going to exist that you're talking about? Do you mean basically?
It would be on the corner, essentially, you're talking about the New York barriers, it's essentially a fence around the corner that literally prevents people from, let's say on 6th Avenue in the 40s, there's a bunch of places where you cannot cross 6th Avenue. They block, you can't go, you have to go to the north side of the intersection.
And could we do that without the agreement of the county? Could we put that up? Do we have that control?
We would still need to go through the county.
Yeah.
And it's extremely, extremely ugly.
Yeah.
I think my point, not to belittle, is that we need to get our heads together. I think there's enough goodwill at the county, elected officials, because professionals will be professional, to see this as an eminent problem. Our police
that's
chief.
right.
I think we need to move from studying and talking about it to doing something, because I think there's an urgency to it. I think it's
But they present, I mean, to their,
No,
to be fair to them, they gave this study,
Right,
I think, in August of 18. We're now getting to it. I would like to see us move faster on these things, because these are, to your point, this is a life safety issue, and this is something that we need to be moving on. We have safe routes to school. I think we can incorporate into that. I think the green bike lanes, all these things, we should be moving them along as quickly as possible.
So maybe this would be a good time to ask for next steps from the manager, with the caveat that I personally would like to see us do something at that intersection faster than everything else that we may be trying to incorporate. So
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think maybe the next step is we go forward with the permitting and the work for the green stripe lane, and we go forward with focusing specifically on this intersection at Grand Bay and looking at other solutions, and maybe we can phase out the program. So phase one would be the green bike lanes and a solution for this intersection.
Excuse me for interrupting me. Why did you mix the bicycle green lanes with the issue at hand of this particular intersection? And I spoke to a lot of county commissioners, including the mayor, that we need to figure out the system works because elected officials sometimes can make decisions for the better good, notwithstanding, quote, objective criteria, which I question objective. I think what we should focus is on this intersection.
We can do multiple things at the same time.
Okay,
When
but-
we're doing a comprehensive plan for Crandon, I don't think we focus just on one. I agree, this is a danger zone that we
I
should
think this should
focus
be
on.
the
I mean, the
carve
one
out
thing-
that we
Reason
try to
why?
fast track.
If you go
answer
to
your
any
question?
elected official or anybody asking for 2 favors, you get none. If you ask for one, you focus, it doesn't diminish the priority and the planning. I'm just saying this intersection, it is increasingly concerning to all the people I talk to, whether they're residents or their children's parents. And I think that should be our priority. And it has to be, Mayor and fellow, it's going to have to be our political making some
The green
rounds.
bike lanes don't
Because we
require
have a
any
lot of goodwill.
favors. The reason why I brought it up was because we do have a grant on the green bike lanes, and it's timely. We've been asking DOT to give us a few minutes to get here, so that's why. And there are no favors with the green bike lanes. The county is already moving forward with the conflict
Right.
points, so there's no favor. So
Right,
and
we're not looking, I think
Well,
we
and
can
it's
do
It's the
both.
also, as you
timeliness of
explained
the
to me,
grant.
it's a project ongoing with the striping that's happening in the park.
Right.
And so we have to stage along with them to keep the cost as low as possible. But I would agree with Councilmember Laredo that it sounds like we are all prioritizing that Grand Bay. And while the green bike lane it's pretty much done and dusted, you have other steps to do, but you know what they are, and it's already been sort of allotted for in your timetable of work.
Right.
So if that can just continue on its regular path, but at the same time, to really set down a priority to figure out what to do with Grand Bay, I think is what I'm hearing up here.
And I my feeling on this, and using common sense, would be, why don't we go down, to your point, you want a quick fix, but why don't we pursue, I'd like, I mean, the
solution.
ultimate solution, right? I think we can all agree, the best solution would be a traffic light. I mean, because that solves the pedestrian traffic and the traffic issue, because we've seen, as we stood out there, you can see there's a problem with people trying to turn left into Village Greenway. There's people coming out of Grand Bay trying to go left. There's some difficulties there. So if we put in a light there, we should at least do the signal warrant analysis to see if it's even a possibility, and do that as quickly as possible. To Councilmember Petros's point, I would prefer that the county pay for this, but the reality is, I'd like to know how much it's going to cost. What's that?
I think you leave it there right now.
But I'd like to get this
Well, if we
moving.
get
I'd
a
like to get
short-term
some.
solution, then we might be able to go through the proper channels for the long-term solution.
I think we should be working on both at the same time. The short term, let's go, but at the same time, let's see if we can get some pricing on the signal analysis, and move it forward and see.
I
what
think
we
we
can
have
do.
a creative manager. And you
Yeah,
can
and
come
I
back
think
with a
also
good
it's
idea.
important to keep in mind, while we all think that a light's a good idea, there's so much to this, and we don't know the effect a light has down the rest of Crandon, and we have massive traffic issues as it is, and we're trying to get our lights as smart as they can get, as fast as they can be. Yeah, so But just, I think we should caution us saying, matter of factly, like, we know a traffic light is the best solution.
Right, but I think that's the I think we assume at this point.
We would like to know.
Right, correct. I think that's.
I would like to make it into a motion, because sometimes we do a lot of conversation and there's consent. I mean, you put it much better than I think we should I'd like to make a motion that we make it a priority, a policy priority, instructing the manager specifically to resolve this issue pedestrian, and that the other things are parallel activity, like she so eloquently said, that need not be stopped and that need to be studied. We already studied it. Just specifically, what can we do to safely get our kids across that area? That would be sort of my motion, and you work out the details, but I really would give you my advice, and don't get it all in the soup, because it's going to get lost. It's a super priority, I think, and that would be a motion.
I think we can just give direction. Direction of council. We can all do that. Do we all agreement, or Councilmember Segurola?
What we're really asking her to do is to start petitioning the county for change.
And I also think public participation is important. So my next step would be literally set up a tent, notice a meeting, and observe and get the feedback from folks of what they're looking for. And at the same time, we would run the engineering study, submit for the application for the permit, and then we would bring back a resolution authorizing the project, the construction permit, and the budget.
Let's get
it done. That's not my motion.
No.
Let me see if I can get, my English sometimes is not very good. I think we collectively have enough goodwill in the political structure for a reasonable, prudent solution, specifically today, moving forward, on pedestrian crossing. The rest of the stuff, it's attached to it, it's an appendix, but I want to make sure the focus is on this intersection pedestrian, because if you go the way of a study about a traffic light, it's going to get you, it will get you in another study. And I believe we can collectively, both professionally with the county staff and us with the county commissioners that we know, to make this happen, because it is common sense. It is something that I'm glad that the police chief agrees, and thanks to their more strict enforcement of traffic, we have avoided something, but it's going to happen. And boy, it'd be hard to sit in this seat if something does happen. So I don't want to dilute the focus of my motion, which does not preclude any of the other stuff.
It's direction from council. Councilmember McCormick, and then let's.
So you feel we've given her direction?
Yeah, but it's just gone off again into a study and a contract.
No, there's no study, a permit.
If you pick up the phone, I'll help you and call a couple of people. They'll come out and
Councilmember Segurola?
I agree with the sentiment of what you're saying, but I think what the manager's saying is, in order to comply with your sentiment, she has to go through all those steps. Am I right?
And we'll prioritize them, and we'll pick up the phone and call, but I don't think there's anything that we're asking for that requires any special favors at this point. But if I do run into obstacles, I will be sure to let each of you know that we need that help, but I don't think we need any special favors at this point.
Councilmember McCormick?
So it just occurred to me when you were talking, or someone mentioned Katie, maybe short-term solutions, and your emphasis, Councilmember Laredo, on needing to address this in pedestrian safety as quickly as possible. It reminded me that when we had the motorcycle accident and we did a little workshop with Chief Press, there was a lot of conversation and requests for crossing guards on Crandon at a few spots, not only during school commuting hours, but in after-school activity commuting hours, right? Like coming back and forth. And so I think my question would be, can we direct the manager and Chief Press to look into the cost of staffing maybe 1 or 2 points on Crandon Boulevard, and then for us to really try to widely publicize that so that parents and children can try to cross at the 1 or 2 spots that have a staffed crossing guard during those after school hours. Especially I find like dusk, and now that it's winter and it's getting dark earlier, is really dangerous, and it's when people are rushing to get home. You're good?
Yeah,
Thank you.
So you're saying not, because I wanted to talk to the chief about having 3 for after school, You're talking even later than that.
Later than that. I think, I mean, if
I
we
think
think
that's
of the
right.
motorcycle accident, it was on the way home
Right.
from an after-school activity. It was in the evening.
You can
So,
bring that back and kind of get a sense, yeah.
Yeah, we just
That,
awarded
that
the
may be
new.
the fastest solution, short-term solution that we can do. That's a great idea, so.
Yes, ma'am, and I'm glad you brought up the dust, because, I mean, this lighting, I've come close a couple of times, particularly with those little scooters, they go so fast,
and everyone's in a rush.
I don't,
Mayor
okay.
Vernon had a comment.
Yeah, just to very briefly, thank you, first off, for looking into this issue. I think it is critical and it's time sensitive, but we don't want to be, at the same token, do something just to do something. We want a long-term fix, not a short-term solution, and a chainsaw can make it safer tomorrow. Okay, there's a light that is totally engulfed in trees that shines light across that entire intersection at night, and right now it is pitch black. You take 2 trees down and it's
Take them all down.
Light as day.
Take all 4 of those.
so, and in his study, I even, I saw all the way down Crandon, you've got trees that are covering signs up, et cetera. I know for a fact on that intersection, there is a group of trees, and I know Ceci
Ceci's in
doesn't
the
like the
back.
word chainsaw, but you can't transplant them.
Oh, you can't?
No, no, not these. So,
For the greater
but-
good, Ceci.
But just take a look when you drive out of here tonight, how black that intersection
Oh, it
is
is. And-
going into Grand Bay.
Walking past
And there's
there,
lights there.
I hadn't noticed.
And
it.
when
Sorry,
you, when
and
you,
they need to just be removed. This
Yeah.
isn't a pruning
no, this
issue.
isn't a pruning issue.
No, you think you're all right
This
back.
isn't a pruning issue. It just doesn't work.
That's right.
And for some reason, when the county did the lights on Crandon, they failed to put one on the south side corner. And if you look from across the street and count, they're perfectly, X amount of feet apart from one another, but there's not one on the south side corner by the fountain, but there's one on the other corner on the exit side. And I think the power's there. I think the ability just to stick a pole in there is there already.
So maybe we
And
can add that to
yeah,
our list. of
if that's
checking
something
with
that
the
can be
county
looked
about-
at, that will light up that intersection at night and make it completely safe, because the accidents that have occurred in front on that crosswalk have happened either early morning before the sun has come up with joggers and walkers, or late in the evening with people coming home or leaving, where people walk out in front and you can't see them until they're, right in front of you. So, thank you. Thank you. Good luck with it, too.
Also, the short-term solution point I take very well, and I think that we should have these evening crossing guards all the time. But I'm going to get it in short-term and then press to keep it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Next item, Mayor, is the consent agenda.
I have a question on the minutes, just a clarification. Maybe you recall on page 4.
Which
there's-
minutes?
The only one, the November, right? Where it says that the mayor, regarding all commercial institutional applicants to complete a 6-hour training program. And then 2 paragraphs down, then Councilman London said that he wanted that removed, and I don't know.
Which one are you looking
Oh,
at?
page 4 out of 9 of the one we're looking at, which is November 19th.
Right, all institute applicators to complete
Eh,
regarding requiring, it wasn't.
Right, but then London argues against it, and it sort of hangs there. What did we decide?
Well, we discussed it. It wasn't, I wasn't
And he just said,
requesting
"No, I don't want
And
it."
he said he didn't want it, yeah.
So it's not an
Anything-
action.
Not remove
anything-
it.
We didn't
remove it at
no.
this pass. It's still sitting in
Still
there
sitting there.
to be potentially modified at the second reading
Right.
in January.
Would you
Okay.
feel better if we inserted a sentence that said that it wasn't removed?
Or just to be considered for the next reading or something.
Well,
like
it just
Then
said.
we would have to,
6
we
hours.
would have to pull it from the consent agenda and hear it
But I
after the
just,
consent.
it
but-
doesn't read well. It just, one says A and the other says B, and it says what.
Well,
what
no,
do we
but it
decide?
says, I addressed the council regarding requiring, and he said he was against it. We didn't take any action. I wasn't adding it, and he wasn't taking it off.
Okay.
I
That
feel
was
like
just,
we pulled it anyway. Here, we're talking
all
about
right,
it,
well,
right?
let's just.
No, because the
Okay.
ordinance was adopted on first reading. If not, it would say as amended.
No, she
No,
just pulled the
she's talking
minutes.
about the
I'm
ordinance.
talking about the
She's-
minutes.
yeah, But we're
These
going
minutes
back.
to
It was
pull
just a-
them?
No, we're not pulling them.
Okay.
Oh, that's fine. If you're comfortable with this and it was your issue, I
What
just
I
didn't understand the dialogue.
I know
Okay,
what
with
you're-
that, I move that, and I move the ballistic helmets purchase.
Wait, no, hold on.
Oh,
We've got to
consent
move
agenda.
this consent agenda. I moved it.
I second it.
Thank you. Let's,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
okay.
Motion carries.
So that
Okay.
includes C, right? The ballistic helmets?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Helmets were done.
Next item is an ordinance on first reading, an ordinance of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, amending Section 2-21, Defense of Officials in Ethics Matters to provide for the cost of defense of an elected official as further provided herein, providing for severability, providing for codification, providing for conflicts, and providing for an effective date.
Moved.
Second.
Thank you.
Can the mayor, can you,
We have open, I'd like to open this for public comments really quick. Anybody have comments on this?
I
Going to
don't have
close
any
public
speakers
comments.
tonight. Thank you.
Councilmember Loretta, do you have a comment?
yeah, I'd like to understand what we're doing here and
Why don't
and
we
it's
have-
so long.
Okay, I'm going to have the attorney
and-
explain it to us.
It is extremely long. I
there's just-
thought-
Well, Councilmember Segarola, introduce it because it's your item.
Okay, well, here we have for first reading an amendment to Section 221, which I just realized, Chad, we have to amend the name of this because now it's much more than ethics.
It is. We removed in ethics.
Okay, perfect. Basically, it's a comprehensive ordinance that provides for the defense of officials in ethical, criminal, or civil matters. And it provides a mechanism for requesting representation, for the village paying for it, for the village being reimbursed for pretty much everything from A to Z. It tracks the law.
Not the village being reimbursed.
Potentially, the village may get reimbursed under certain circumstances towards the end. Yeah, if they're found guilty or if.
If we can seek it from someone
Correct.
else.
So it leaves the door open for the village being reimbursed. And it tracks the law pretty much comprehensively, like I said, from A to Z on every matter. There is, in all frankness, there is one area that I included in here that goes a little bit beyond the law, and that is the representation when a council member gets called in for an interview. They are not the target of an investigation, but they're called in as a witness. I added that a council member can request the village pay for representation because the fact is you can walk in as a witness and walk out as a target. I'd rather be all comprehensive. If people are going to be up here serving as public servants for free, I think we and any future council member deserves that consideration. But besides that, it tracks the case law, and I'll turn it over to Chad.
So I'll just start first what the law provides, so everybody understands. The law provides that all of you up here, if you are charged with a crime and you are found to be not guilty, in other words, charged with a crime that arises out of the performance of your official duties and you're conducting a public purpose, and you are found not guilty, you are entitled to be reimbursed for your attorney's fees in defending yourself. That's the law. What this ordinance does is it goes beyond the law, and it's really a timing factor. What it says is, and it does a little more too, as the council member said, but what it provides is that instead of waiting until the council member has been found to be not guilty for the village to pay for the fees, if an elected official is charged, that official can request to the manager to be reimbursed, to have his or her fees paid up front at the beginning of the litigation.
Or a retainer.
Just so that person's not paying the lawyer themselves, that the village is paying the lawyer. If that person is found to be guilty or liable, like Councilmember Segarola said, that person would be required to pay back the village. It also goes further, as stated, that witnesses are covered too. So if you are called in your official capacity as a witness, you can have representation paid by the village. Also, investigations, if you're being investigated, you can be covered by the village up front. There is also an appeal period that has been added. So if the manager denies the request, you can appeal it to the council. And I think that's pretty much the summary of it. I hope I was clear. Well, let me tell you the intent of the law first. So the intent of the law is that the cases had held for this representation by the government to the officials so it doesn't cause a chilling effect on people wanting to run for office. I think that you could, look, whether or not this ordinance is here or not, for the most part, I think that the council could grant an elected official representation at the outset of being charged if it arises out of their performance and in their public duties. But I do like there being a process in place.
Absolutely.
I like there being it clear because I have seen it in other jurisdictions where it gets very messy because it puts a lot of pressure on the elected officials here. I'm sorry, Andrea, it puts pressure on the manager. She'll make that determination. And if that elected official is not happy, then they can appeal it to the council. So, I mean, I don't object to you doing a process.
Vice Mayor?
All right, I want to do a clarification first and then ask some questions. So currently, our code only covers ethical, but not criminal or civil.
Only ethical.
For reimbursements.
Correct.
And that's only if you're charged, not if you're investigated, not if you're a witness, but only if you're charged in an ethical issue. We are mandated, right, to pay for those legal fees as long as you, as long as you're found.
So, correct.
As long as you're not found guilty.
So the reason why
Or
this
held liable.
ordinance you have in place is when this ordinance was originally put forward, the case law was unclear that ethical charges were covered under the law. That has changed. The law is clear that ethical charges are covered. Our ordinance, exactly what you said, currently provides that if you are charged with an ethical violation, you can seek reimbursement from the village, go to the village manager in that same process.
Okay, and
Actually,
then.
Actually, if I may
go
answer another part, our current ordinance is silent as to investigations.
Correct.
But the case law says you're entitled to defense and payment if there's an investigation, even if you're not charged.
Well,
So-
I don't know if we agree with that position. I think that, there's actually law that says contrary specifically to grand juries. But I think that there is no case in Florida that expressly says one way or the other.
I don't want to get too much into that, but then what we have as the new ordinance here, we are now allowing the investigation, witnesses, or being charged, whether it's ethical, criminal, or civil. That's what we have in our hands right now. So a couple of questions that I have, and there's some things that worry me.
May
here.
I ask you something? And also,
Yes.
if I'm so I can understand your follow-up, and also advances your cash flow.
Yes,
That's
you
a big difference, right?
You can do it in the front, but we
That's
could have done
correct.
it before, or no? It always had to be after.
No, so without this ordinance, you could always do it. Somebody can come to the council and ask. but
Up to
this
the
is putting-
council.
Yeah, but this is putting in a process.
Right,
that-
this is
that-
codifying something.
This is codifying.
that
Okay.
It takes it out of the political realm.
Okay, so some of my worries is that
Leaves the choice open.
Correct.
You can still do it before or after. It doesn't require one or the other.
Okay, so there's still some stuff I'm trying to digest in here. I'm sure a lot of you are, so I'm still uncomfortable with some of the stuff that's in here. So one is the village manager. How much power does the village manager have to decide whether they meet the requirements or not? And how much are we going to, because I think from at one point when we discussed this, we wanted to define what reasonable fee meant, but there's still no definition in here. So, and I think that us as a board have to protect how much money we're allowing to be covered and how much they're paying for attorneys. Even if it's just an investigation, or even a witness, if you spend $30,000 in there, we may say, well, that's crazy. I mean, you're spending $2,000 an hour on your attorney. So how much control do we have and the manager have in that position?
So currently, the manager makes a determination as to whether or not the charge is being brought or for acts or omissions arising out of or in the course and scope of the official's duties while serving a public purpose. That's the manager's responsibility. Now, the village attorney, as it's provided in here, I believe, also has to concur with that determination. It says the village manager's approval denial is subject to the village attorney's concurrence if the request is consistent with the requirements of this section.
But his question was what divided us in a previous case, which reasonable.
I want to answer
that was the second. That was the second point. That was the second point.
Because that's the sticking point for me.
I'm happy to let Councilmember Sigorola answer it. I think I haven't talked to him, but our answers will probably be the same.
Chad and I actually, we had a discussion about that. There is a section of the ordinance that says that when a council member selects an attorney, they have to be experienced in that area of the law. And then you have the other part that says that the village is only responsible for paying reasonable fees. It's a double-edged sword because you're asking for an expert, which is going to cost more than a journeyman, and at the same time you're saying a reasonable fee. You can't put a number on that, and especially as time goes on. A reasonable fee 30 years ago was one amount. A reasonable fee today is going to be very different. So it's a fluid sliding scale depending on the situation that will have to be negotiated and discussed at the time.
Sure. So that brings me to my point that a reasonable fee could be discussed in getting an approval from council on whether we are going to reimburse you or not if you're under investigation, witness, or being charged. You know, there could be, and it's something that we could think about a little bit, is that, and I'm still not 100% sure what the answer was of how much the manager can allow. I mean, the manager can allow, say that you meet with you and the manager together can say, yes, you meet the criteria and that's it. And we're on the hook to whatever fee comes in is going to come in. But we could say that, okay, if you're charged, we understand and we should be reimbursing it because at the end, if it doesn't turn into something, there would be payback. However, if you're a witness or if you are being investigated, maybe there should be some cap saying that, you know, we're only going to go up to $5,000 on there. So, you know, you better find some attorney and tell them that's the limit and that's all you're going to do if we're thinking about that. But I don't like the idea of just the open checkbook going out.
Have an open checkbook.
But Councilman,
well, this and just 2 points. By the way, the criteria that I provided before would also include, you know, whether or not the fee is reasonable, because it is a defined term, and that's part of this section that the manager would have to make. And to what the Councilmember McCormick was saying, this is different than the manager's typical procurement limitations. The manager could. She could. This is an ordinance, so it would stand on its own, and she could make a authorize the village to pay those fees. Now, whether or not this council wants to put an initial cap in the ordinance, and then at some point the manager has to come to the council, that's a different story. But right now it's silent as to that point.
And if I may,
okay, go ahead.
With regard to what you said about figuring out what the fee is, that was part of the thinking in the ordinance where it said someone can apply for prepayment because then that could be negotiated at that time. And if someone's going to have counsel, they discuss it with the attorney, they discuss it with the manager, an agreed rate is come to, and you're good to go. And to answer your question about if somebody's a witness, it should be nowhere near $5,000 because you're literally just talking a few hours.
Okay.
So but I'd be hesitant to put a cap on it.
Because suppose, that's what I'm saying, like there are times where you're a witness and you get deposed on something.
Correct.
And that's 8, 16, whatever it is hours. So I think it's tough to put a cap. I understand there has to be a reasonable standard, but it's very hard. It's very difficult to say.
And reasonable fee is a defined legal term.
It's a term of art.
So if you're trying to get, I just want to be clear, and I'm almost done. If you're trying to get prepayment, you have to come to council and ask for that.
You have to go to the manager.
You have to go to the manager.
But the manager can make the decision if you get prepaid or not.
Correct.
Yeah. See, I think that's something that maybe that's something on a case-by-case basis we should be looking at and saying, does this really need that or not, and how much are we talking about?
Yes, but that puts it back into the political realm.
Right.
But do we want our manager to make those
I
decisions?
think we should. Because let's remind ourselves that we had a very controversial case where it pivoted on reasonable versus, but after those fees were already incurred.
Right.
Of course.
And so the only problem I have with this, which you have highlighted, thank you, Mark Cleary, is when does this prior approval as to reasonable has to be before it gets to be a big bill. And I know it's difficult, and I know it's an intangible, but I don't want to have the appeal and the political bombshell that we inherited from before, where, in my view, it was very clear it was unreasonable. I was outvoted, but it was already done. So I don't know if it can be. It's also so long. I don't know why it has.
Because if we
can have an input or direction, because you're right. Otherwise, it will come to us only after it's been incurred.
What I foresee happening is someone goes to the manager and says, I'm involved in X, and I have this attorney that I've selected, and I would like the village to prepay, and they charge Y number of dollars. The manager and the attorney are going to get together. They're going to decide if Y number of dollars is reasonable or not. If they do, the manager, according to the ordinance, is authorized to start paying. If they don't agree, either to the representation or to the rate, then that person can come and appeal to the council. And then we have the input. But if the manager and the attorney agree to the rate and the representation, honestly, there's no reason for us to get involved and leave it out of the political realm.
Councilmember McCormick, then Councilmember Petros.
I would like to talk about the possibility of having some sort of a cap, like maybe tying it to the manager's regular procurement, whatever that is at the time that, now we have it's $10,000, her cap, what she can spend without coming to us. And that, I imagine, may change over time, go up, and we wouldn't have to amend the ordinance if we just sort of benchmarked it at whatever that is, so that anything above $10,000 does come to council, at which time we can really review, right? We've had it, I feel we've set a precedent already of what people can do, right? If you think it's unreasonable, maybe it's unreasonable, but clearly it was enough money to get the desired outcome and the reimbursement, and so we've set that precedent. So I would like to think about that and to put it on the table of having to have some control over determining what's reasonable, to have a cap, and I would suggest tying it to whatever the manager's current ability to spend is without coming to council.
Councilmember Petros.
First of all, I would like to think that we hadn't set a precedent, that we had a case and we came to a decision, but that doesn't mean that we wouldn't necessarily reach a different decision with a different case. So hopefully, because I wasn't here that night, but I am assuming that something like this is meant to keep us from having to make a case-by-case basis and have a process in place. So I like that idea. The thing that I'm concerned about is we look at this as if all of us sitting up here will always be reasonable and act in a good way. And if we're putting something in place, we need to make sure that there are guards that keep somebody who may not be acting in the best interest of the village. And these are taxpayer dollars that are funding whatever gets paid for. So if we make this too broad, that's a concern for me. And I'd like to ask our attorney, how can we put in this ordinance, is there something that we could add, or are we protected with the language that you guys came up with, where if somebody really seeks legal advice when they may not need it because they know they're going to get reimbursed? And I would like to avoid that case scenario in the future.
Well, so you can only seek reimbursement once you've been charged.
Not in this one.
Not in this
Hold
one.
on. Or if you're a witness, okay, related to your official capacity, or if you're being investigated, okay? But an investigation, by the way, is included within the term charged. So, I mean, it's
Not clear to me.
It's not clear?
It's in the definitions.
We'll talk about it.
Okay, so there's three categories, right? Charged, which says can result in being removed from office, being imprisoned or placed on criminal probation, or paying a civil fine or judgment. Okay, included within the definitional term of charged is the initiation of an investigation preliminary to any such proceeding. What's also included is whether or not you're a witness, you would be covered also. Those are the only categories in which you can get it. So, I mean, it's a pretty significant standard. If you guys as a whole want to make it stricter, you can. I'm happy to draft something that's stricter. But I think the initial thrust of this ordinance came from us tweaking it to include investigations, which then, if you're going to do that, you might as well open it up to the broader points. So,
Yeah, ask a question.
Well, I had a couple, Vice Mayor and then me.
But mine's short. I just wanted to agree with Councilmember Petros that we have to look at the other end of this. If there's a bad person or a person that's continuously warned not to do certain things and they continually do it and they're constantly being put into investigations, and that goes on the taxpayers to continually pay for this because they think they're above the law or whatever they want to do. I think we need to protect ourselves on that side, and there's something about taking it case by case. I mean, I think that we all want to help each other. We don't want us to go through suffering. I think I'm somebody who can actually speak a little bit about it because I was under investigation only a few months ago for the conflict of interest, which was dropped. I never brought in a lawyer. I went down there, spoke to them myself. I did not want to spend a dime on anybody or, for that. And, I don't know if you need $30,000, $50,000 when you're under investigation or not. But, I didn't feel I did anything wrong, and I went there and I spoke the truth, and they dropped it. So I think that, I don't want to get into that area where if you have somebody who's like, oh, I have something I did wrong, but since they're paying for it, I'm just going to go and get myself $1,000 an hour lawyer and bring them in here and we're good to go. And we have to be very careful of how we protect that.
I have two questions. I mean, one of them is, let's say theoretically, the action is against a council member and it's a discrimination claim, right? Is that covered by this?
That's civil.
Yeah,
And yes, it is.
I think there's two different things. One thing we haven't touched on is that you also, as the council members, do have insurance that the village provides for all of you. And so that might be a claim covered by insurance defense. But yes, you'd be acting, I mean, depending on if the discrimination.
Assuming it's discrimination by a village, it would be a village employee suing the village and claiming that I'm
correct. So it's within your scope of official duties and you're acting in a public purpose, then yes, either under this ordinance or our insurance will provide a defense to you.
And in most civil cases, insurance will provide a defense as opposed to village coffers.
Right, okay. And then the other thing that's fine. Councilmember Laredo, you had a question?
Yes, I wonder if you can point to the language in the proposed thing where the manager and the city attorney set the first definition of reasonable.
Okay.
Where is that? Because I know it's about approving it, but I don't see the reasonable standard.
So if you look in the term, okay, I'm sorry, you asked for exactly where. On page 2, in subparagraph, we'll start with subparagraph 4, the term legal expenses. It says, shall mean reasonable attorney's.
Wait a minute, hold on, I lost I'm trying to correct this thing here. That's on tab, here we go, sorry, I was making, on definitions,
Yeah.
okay.
So there's a defined term of legal expenses, which includes a reasonable attorney fee, okay?
Now, my question is specifically is where is it that you and the manager define that?
Right, I wanted to, okay, I understand so.
C at the bottom, page 2.
See?
So where we do it, that's going to be determination that's going to be made by us.
Well, just point to me the language where that says that in English.
Subsection C, starting at the bottom of page 2.
Right, then it has like 4 subsections?
Yep, that's all that.
So where is the one that it actually says the manager and the city attorney?
Well, it says it in paragraph 5.
Village manager's approval or denial is subject to the village attorney's concurrence as said request is consistent with the requirements of the section.
But I think your question is, where's the criteria which makes
for reasonable legal fees?
So that is a term that would be in our consultation there'll be some discretion, I guess.
I understand that, but where is it? Why can't you put that in this language?
It's not, it could be included.
I would like to include it.
But it's not included because, as Chad pointed out, it's a term of art.
It is a term of art, but why would us, as layman volunteers, be put in a position to define that when we have professionals that we pay well to at least give us the first barrier, to your point? And then then there's an appeal process and everything else, but
according to this ordinance, we as laypersons are not the ones that have to decide the reasonable fee. It is the manager with the advice of the attorney.
That's why I want to see the language to that effect in English. Where can we put that in?
I think that we can try to do something to appease you.
But very
Yes,
specific.
I understand. I got you.
Okay. Because, and the second point, which I brought up at the last thing, and I know this may not be constitutionally correct, but I really, we're getting better. I think this whole village is turning toward the better. We have to stop this frivolous handful of people who are attacking people all the time. Is there any remedy that we can put in here that we can go after? That's not the correct diplomatically acceptable term, that we can pursue our interest for people who make it a practice to these kinds of, I want to call them frivolous, that triggers all these expenses.
So if you go to page 5 on subparagraph G, we do have a provision regarding malicious, frivolous, or groundless allegations, which
on what is it? 5?
Page 5.
Is that new?
G?
Yeah.
I like it.
So what we did was we extended that we first extended it to include those that's really related to ethics. But what we did, and Councilmember Sigurolo and I worked closely on this, is we added paragraph H, which is the next one, which allows us, we reserve any rights under the law to recover any legal expenses and reimbursable costs incurred by the village from the complaining party in any civil action. So it doesn't say criminal action because when we were discussing it, you can't do that. So we limited it to a civil action. But as far as malicious, frivolous, or groundless allegations that are ethically related, for example, a violation against the Miami-Dade Ethics Code or the Florida statutes chapter on ethics, there is this provision here that does let us go after and recover our costs.
Yeah, it seems to be, I'm glad that you pointed that out, that two messages have to come out of this. One is that we're prepared to defend, everybody here is a volunteer, everybody's trying to do the best they can, and that's fine. And the issue of reasonableness is one that obviously you need to clarify. You're going to do that. And the other one is we need to have the message go out that we're not going to, well, you know what I mean. Okay, I'm not going to say it. So would it help you if we just move it for first reading?
I have just two quick questions because I want to, this all arose out of a situation.
It's a good step, by the way, Mayor.
I think this is great. I appreciate you bringing this forward because this is something, because there is a chilling effect. What happened when people are suddenly put, as Vice Mayor was put, our former mayor, Councilmember London, it's ridiculous when people come out of, oh, that's right. Yeah, I apologize. The Councilmember Petros as well. When these things happen and people put us in spots that were not of our own doing and we were not doing anything wrong, I think we certainly should be defended. But I want to be clear because there's a nuance here. Is it found innocent or is it being not found guilty?
It's acquitted, which means not guilty.
Well, that's different because the situation is one in which the person was not acquitted. The person was not adjudicated. Basically, the person said, mea culpa, and they dismissed the charges.
Not being charged is equal to being acquitted.
Okay, that's
under the law.
I want to make sure.
In the case we're talking about, if I could just tell you what the ordinance says.
Please, I want to be clear.
So it starts on the bottom of page 4, and then it goes on to page 10. And in the last line on page 4, it says, where said official was acting in the course and scope of the official's function and said official is subsequently acquitted, not liable, or the charge or charges against said official are dismissed upon no violation being found.
And acquitted
So
is
in
a
the
specific word.
but I want, okay, so I want to be clear, like in the situation that occurred, if something like that arose and the decision was, what, they decided not to pursue it any further, correct?
There was no charges, yes.
Right. So in that situation, would
was a
that
non-legal
person
decision.
be covered?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure that,
Because it falls under
I
the
don't want
legal
less rights,
definition
I
of
want more
acquitted.
rights for people up here.
Right.
But
Okay.
under investigation, there is no charge. There is no.
But you're still covered under this
But you're
ordinance.
covered.
Yeah, but there's you're
Because
always,
that was the ambiguity in
If it
that
doesn't go into a
situation.
charge,
Right.
you're,
Okay,
it is what it is, right?
I just want to make sure we're
We should all remember too, we can make mistakes.
Yes,
And-
absolutely.
I mean, I know in my situation, there was a portion of it that was a mistake and,
No,
but
well, you didn't know.
If you want, we can make that sentence, we can clarify that sentence a little more. I think it's clear, like Councilmember Segura said, but if you want, we can
I'm
clarify
fine. If
that
you guys
point.
feel it's clear enough, if you're clear enough on it, then I'm clear with it.
The reason, I don't have a problem with adding more to it.
I don't
but
want to overkill either. I don't want to over-lawyer it.
I like cleaner because
I agree.
acquitted already has a specific
Okay.
definition.
All right, fine.
So if you add on top of that, but then our definition is different from the official definition, then you got another problem.
Okay, fair enough. Then I'm good with this. Let's move it. Councilmember, you want to
Yeah,
move
so this will be first reading.
it? I think, did we already move it? We already put it on.
It was moved and it was seconded.
Yeah, this is first reading.
It's a roll call. Councilmember McCormick,
yes.
Vice Mayor Moss,
No.
Councilmember Petros,
Yes.
Councilmember Segurola,
Yes.
Mayor Davy,
Yes.
and Councilmember Laredo.
Yes. And you'll come back with the second.
The second reading
With
will
the
be
amendment.
determined
Yes.
at the point in time that
get it.
the
Okay.
council meeting schedule for 2020 is determined.
Thank you.
Next item is a resolution of the Village Council of the Village of Key Biscayne, Florida, urging our U.S. senators and representatives to pass the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act 763 to levy an annually increasing revenue neutral fee on the carbon and fossil fuels at the point of production or importation and return a dividend to all Americans, providing for transmittal and providing for an effective date.
Move it.
Second. Essentially, just very quickly, this is something that had been brought to our attention by some local high school students, frankly. And I just think we should be showing our support. We live on a barrier island. We are impacted by sea level rise. And I think this is just, we need to reinforce to our folks, and we have some good folks up in there in Washington, actually, on these issues. But I would like to push it, and so I'd ask for your support on this.
You got it.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next, under reports and recommendations, mayor and council members, chief resiliency officer position description update, village council, and this was brought forth at the last meeting.
Okay,
And the
so,
manager was instructed?
correct. We had some discussions. I don't know if anybody had additional input for the manager, but the manager is now going to put the position out. We're going to start looking at people.
Okay.
I do have one question. How, in the organization, where do you see the chief resiliency officer sitting? Is this its own department? Is this under the public works? Is this under manager? Where do you see this person?
My plan starting off is directly in the manager's office.
Okay.
By the way, I know that we may have a chance to talk more about this wonderful investment in time. All the successful people that I met there, elected officials, it permeates the organization.
Absolutely.
So we're going to fall into, give them a little office, a title, resiliency, and then he or she will need an assistant and a secretary. It has to be across the board, including the elected officials. All the 4 counties are represented.
Of course.
It's a culture more than a position.
That's right.
And it has to be embedded in the organization. So that's why it has to be someone literally out of the office. We got too many people sitting in offices.
They work hard. All right.
Next item is Village of Key Biscayne's Council Internship Program. Councilmember Segurola.
Well, I just wanted to report to all of you, I think we've made some pretty good progress. I had a very long conversation with our clerk, Jennifer. She gave me a lot of good feedback. She's been involved in internship programs when she was City of Doral.
Yes.
And she gave me a lot of pointers. I also had a conversation with Juan Gutierrez in the background with HR. And I think we have a process and a structure pretty much set up. Now we just have to finalize it and bring it back. I'm hoping for January to have it all done. Basically, what we're thinking of doing is the interns will work under the auspices of the clerk's office. She will be the boss as our charter official. She has agreed to take on the job.
That's not what she said in the last meeting.
She agreed to supervise.
Here's a failure to
Sorry if I put her on the spot. But basically, we have a job description. I did some research, found other cities. A lot of cities do the same thing. I had a conversation with Juan. Human Resources will start off with a process. We will come up with a job description, post it for college level students or really anyone. I would prefer to give it to Key Biscayne residents, maybe on a first come, first served basis, and then open it up to everybody, give some sort of preference to that, if that's possible and legal. We'll see.
Yeah.
If legal. But basically, HR will accept resumes, do an initial screening, kick on the resumes over to the clerk's office, which will provide it to us, the council members. We would do interviews, decide who we would like to have as an intern. Then legal, I spoke to Chad about it also a little bit. Legal will do training with public records and sunshine law. And then once that's done, they will be within the clerk's office, but really it's our job, whoever decides to have an intern, for us to be the mentors. We're going to be the ones that are going to be dealing with them on a one-on-one basis. The clerk is there just sort of to supervise, not to really do our jobs for us. With regard to resources, what will it take? We don't really need office space. Personally, I don't care if they work from home, if they work, I think the manager says she has some space she could set aside. The clerk has some space she could set aside. I'm sure in Village Hall, there's somewhere that they could sit down. At most, we might want to give them some laptops to use temporarily. For all the research, everything could be PDF, so you don't need printers. Besides that, I think we're discussing doing it on a semester by semester term, extendable, if both parties are interested. And then after that, it's pretty much whatever we make of it. It's not a mandatory thing. If you don't want to have an intern, you don't have to do it. If you would like the help, you can participate. That's pretty much it. I hope to have the final package together by the January meeting. I don't know if you have any questions.
So I do. I think that we need to look at the primary reason why we want to do this. If the primary reason is to train, educate, and give young students experience, I'm okay with an internship program. But if the real primary reason is that we need help up here, I think we need to be looking at a staff system. And I don't typically agree with non-paid internships. I think they should be paid. But my experience with interns is an extreme learning process for them, right? So it takes a lot of time, a lot of training. A lot of times you ask them to go do something, they bring it back. It's going to be wrong. You're going to end up having to do it anyway. So now you're adding more work to yourself in order to get those things done. So if we're going to do internship, we got to be prepared that this is more training and more work for us than we're going to get out of it. If we want more help for us and we're having issues, which that's a different debate, but I think if that's really the issue, then we would have to have a different discussion on hiring a staff member. Because remember, people will be coming in each semester. New people will be coming in. So what they've learned, now you're retraining a new person. Maybe you can have them for a year or whatever, but they're going to go. So I don't know how these programs are done in these larger cities. Maybe that you have staff members and then they have interns underneath them that kind of follow the ropes and they can take care of that. But it worries me that if we go this internship area, this route that we're looking at, and we're thinking that, hey, this is going to help us, I think we're going to be with a rude awakening. I mean, every once in a while you get that one shining intern that's just capable. I've had one or two before that are just really good, but most of the time it's actually more work for us. It's going to be more work for our clerk, and you're not really getting that investment out as if we're actually hiring someone. So I want to know, what are you thinking? Are you thinking this is more of like giving back to the community, helping educate people, or do you see this as, hey, I'm really busy. I don't have enough time to do all this stuff. It would be great to have some help out there. Where do you see it?
I see it as both, to be honest with you. I've had my experience with interns has been very different. It's been very positive in 20 years of working in the legal field. I understand what you're saying about you may end up doing the work yourself. That really does come down to picking the right person. And that's where the responsibility would fall on the council member to do a good interview and to look for the right qualifications. If you're doing it, just to do somebody a favor, you're going to end up doing a whole lot of work. But I see it as getting involvement into the government process. I'm sure a lot of people would like, especially younger people, would like to see it from the inside, see how this works. But at the same time, giving us a hand. It's not. I don't see it as like dumping all our work on them. And gee, you do it for me and come back, and then I'll just sit at the council meeting. But they will help. And at the same time, these are the type of person that I see applying for this position are generally going to be university students that are participating in programs that do the placement for them, that they are looking for employment in government or the public sector, and they are looking for these types of jobs to get experience. So I see it as being a little more filtered than just random people coming from the street. And again, it comes back to the quality of the person you pick. Sure.
Okay, Councilmember Petros.
I'm sort of intrigued by the idea. The execution fails me. I can't figure out how we would do this without it being more of a burden on myself and more of a burden on village staff and the clerk in particular. I know at our last meeting, I don't want her having to manage potentially 7 more people that are volunteering for us that are the volunteers. And so then it ends up going in a lot of different directions. I personally am not sure what I would task an intern with to help me, and that's just me. Like, I don't see myself doing this, which doesn't mean you may find it very useful, so I'm not saying that. The other part of this that I find to be difficult is we would ramp from 0 to 7. If this was something that we thought was a good idea, I almost feel like maybe there should be one intern that is in the office. We're a small organization, and this isn't our full-time job. So we do it a little bit on the side, here, there, and everywhere. And so that's where I also find it to be difficult to think about how an intern, if we had one intern assigned to each one of us, how that would work. So I would think it'd be better to do it.
I had a lot of the same thoughts you did. I'll explain my answers to your questions. With regard to the structure, I see it as being under the clerk's office, for lack of a better word, pretty much in name only. I don't expect the clerk to do anything. It'll be on whoever the council member is to mentor and deal with the intern. The clerk's not supposed to do anything aside from just
things always sound good in theory.
Exactly, play matchmaker. Now, with regard to your question, first, we don't have to have 7 interns. If you don't want one, if you don't feel you're going to get anything out of it, don't participate. It's not going to be mandatory. My first idea was to have 1 or 2 or 3 interns pooled to do all the work, but then I kept coming up with the barriers of sunshine and public record, and there's no way around that. So that's why we had to compartmentalize to council member by council member. So I wish we could do it that way because that would make things a whole lot easier, but we can't because, 2 council members talk to an intern and say, their messages, and suddenly it's going to create a problem with sunshine. Councilmember
McCormick? So I was very intrigued by this idea at first. I also am struggling with, and it's probably my own limitations of how well I would do and not making it create more work for myself. But I've also been thinking, and I don't know if I'm the only one who's had these thoughts about what is it that's keeping us so busy? Like, I know it feels like a full-time job to me, and I'm trying to figure it out. How is it that, or at least a big part-time job at the very least, what is it that we're doing? In the past year, we've increased administrative staff a lot from what we had, right? We have a chief of staff, we have a finance director, we have all of these other people. Why is it that we are feeling this burden to the point of needing individual helpers each? And so I just want to throw that out there, that maybe we need to figure out what it is we're doing and how we're communicating and what's happening that's making us feel like we need all of this help.
My personal opinion is, why would I want an intern? What work would I do with an intern? It would basically come down to research, to researching different things. I know there's a million ideas that pop into my head that I don't have time to research as much as I would like to before the upcoming council meeting. Or if an issue comes up and it might be a last minute, I can have the help of someone doing research in addition to myself. Now, when you have a job and you have a family and then you have other outside commitments and being on council, it would help. If you're missing one or more of those factors, then hey, you have more free time to do your own research. But for people specifically in my position, I see it as beneficial, and at the same time, you sort of create a team. I've just had very good experiences in my office in the past, and you find somebody you have good chemistry with, and it ends up benefiting, and it'll end up benefiting the village as a whole with a greater work product at no cost.
Yeah, I mean, I'm working with Councilmember Petros on this. I get it, and I think I get the idea, and but I'm trying to put myself, where am I going to plug this person in? Is it going to take, to your point, is it going to take more of my time than it's worth? Frankly, what I'll probably do is watch and see what happens to you if this goes forward.
I'll be honest with you, I have no problem with that.
Right, and
I
so
have no problem being the test
I have
case.
no problem, because we're not committing any resources other than we're making more work for Jenny.
That would be the other part of it.
I had my talk with Jenny was, I will not give her work because, and she actually said that in her personal experience, it all comes down to how good the mentor is to the intern. It really comes down to the mentor-intern relationship.
Well, that's right. And so I think that's got to be, if we're going to do this, and again, it'll come back in January and we'll talk more about it. But if you're going to bring this back, it can't be a burden on the clerk. It can't be, and you would be the test case. And that, I think,
I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
I'd like to add that I think it should also, we should figure out a time frame, because I don't want you to do any more work unless we're going to say, yes, we like this idea. But I think there should be a time frame by which our village manager and our clerk can come back and say whether or not this is working for them. So because in a perfect world with good intentions, it works well, but there can be bumps in the road, and what starts out in one direction can go in another, and I would want to make sure that we heard from them.
My thought process on the time frame would be, if we meet in end of January and we agree, let's do this, we implement it end of January, by the end of June, spring, the semester, if we're using that time frame, we'll know if it worked or not.
A couple things. I would like to hear from you, Madam Clerk, what your concerns would be that you would like to have addressed before it comes back at the next meeting. When you think about this, what is it that concerns you?
Primarily, there has to be some type of recruitment process, hiring process. I don't know legally what consent forms need to be signed, if any, at the point in time that they're brought on. So there has to be some type of burden on the administration side for that component. The rest is pretty much, as I mentioned before, playing matchmaker, if you will, me forwarding the resumes to council members, them conducting their interviews, and then bringing that person, if you want to go ahead and hire the intern, that intern then would go into the HR department, and then they would start that process to bring them on. I don't know, background check, whatever's necessary.
The load would be front heavy.
Mr. Mayor.
And so who does the things like, so the background check obviously is HR, so that's one.
Right.
But what about training in terms of understanding how to manage public records and what is a public record and sunshine and
That, together with the village attorney, we would go through that. Very similar to the orientation process that each one of you, when you were elected.
Councilmember Laredo?
Yeah, there are some great ideas that become slippery slopes. And as it relates to village governance, I always go back to the charter. And we clearly wanted to have a council-led village delegating to professionals. The definition is clear when you run for office. We all sought this office, and we knew the burden that implied. When you start this slippery slope, and I've seen it work very badly, now you have, and remember, I remind us of our retreat when we talked about us being more efficient so our department heads and our manager can be efficient. All of a sudden, we have another layer of human beings, capable as they may be, around that we have to do all these things, just what we're talking about, screening, the possibility even legal exposure in terms of sunshine, speaking for us with naively, interfering with administration. It just looks to me like a great idea that it's not applicable to our type of government. It would create a whole layer of problems. I don't know your conversations with Councilor Segurola in terms of interns, whether that was for professionals, like an intern for, like happens in the White House, to people on staff. It's different from elected officials who we are policymakers. And as it relates to the burden of this job, we sought it. We asked people to vote for us. So I'm into keep it small, keep this government small, and put our money and resources on professionals, and we just give them guidance. So while I applaud the initiative, I think it can become a problem that will make us very inefficient. And clearly, it was not the spirit of how we wanted to keep this small.
And I just wanted to add that we have to be careful with the term at no cost, right? Or free, because obviously there's a lot of time on the clerk's side, our HR department, our legal. I mean, it continues, and having this every semester, that burden carries through, as you were saying, that there's a lot of things that get picked up. So there are costs to that, even though they may not be budgeted costs, but time, which is extremely valuable here to get things done and move fast, will be taken. So I think that we also have to keep that in mind as well.
So you want to bring back a plan in January. Where are we on this?
Do I drop it?
That's the question, right? I don't want you spending a lot of your time because you don't have an intern just yet, doing this and then coming back and everybody says, no, thanks very much, but we're not going to do it. I think there needs to be a consensus. Yeah, I think we need a straw vote on this. I mean, my feeling is I would prefer to see, frankly, Ignacio, if the council member wants to do this, have him do it himself. Have you do it. You do don't inundate the attorney, HR, or anybody else until you've got somebody that you want to bring into the program.
Okay.
Is that possible?
That's the problem. There are collegiate courses and programs that funnel people to these types of positions. And if you do it outside of the auspices, the official auspices of the municipality, I don't know if you can get that.
I don't know if I'm necessarily saying not through the village, but you're doing the legwork. So to his point about additional costs and everything, you've got it. You come back, you show it works.
Well, I can't do the background check or the HR stuff. I can't do the HR stuff. I'll be happy to do everything else, but there's certain things I just can't do.
But is it possible not to do it as a staff member, but do it to the clerk's office or something like that, where we hire one intern for the clerk just to learn about the process and stuff like that, and it doesn't because
Ignacio has experience and wants one.
Well, no, but then we assign that person to Ignacio. We all say that person works for Ignacio.
Well, how
but that's still different. But then we're back to the point.
It really creates my investment on a capable intern with the proper would be, for example, now you mentioned to the village clerks, because my efficiency is more hindered by getting things at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Whether it's minutes or a legal opinion, I just cannot do it.
But that
I
might
don't need
not, that
an
might not be the
assistant.
clerk's
Hearing
office.
Jenny
That
wants
might be
an
someone
No,
else.
that
saying,
is, no,
so.
I'm not blaming the clerk
Yeah.
that she gets overwhelmed.
Are you on the
And
fence,
if
Jim?
we get a little bit more time in preparation, that I would bet, that would make us all very efficient. To have assistants, interns is going to be, I've seen it happen. So I would, I don't know if you
I don't think
would
she
like to
wants-
pursue an
Councilmember
intern.
Petros, you want to do the
Well,
straw
then-
vote, or?
Yeah, I'm good.
I'm fine with doing, I just would, Ignacio, I like your idea. I would
like the
like to
idea.
support it. I have to
Right.
say that I
Yes.
agree with Councilmember Laredo's thoughts on the execution of this, and I guess we can take a vote.
Let's just do a straw vote.
What's the straw vote? Whether
Well,
we should
whether or not
continue
Ignacio-
looking
Whether
at
he
this?
Whether or
should
not
continue to
Councilmember
pursue
Figueroa
this.
should
If
pursue
we're gonna
this.
agree that we should put an
Even
intern
with
program.
the caveat that anyone who doesn't feel like it would work for them and isn't effective just
Because it's
doesn't get
taking-
one?
To everybody's point, it is taking resources away from the village.
Exactly.
And having them do HR, and having, the intent, I get the intent, it's a pure intent, but sometimes the results, to Councilmember Laredo's point, is it's a slope. And you suddenly are using resources, as you said, we're thin, right? Our resources for us are pretty thin, so now we're adding to that. We're thinizing them.
So whether you want it or
So, yeah, I
or
think
just
whether we
I'll say
want
either all
Council-
of us get it, or
Do we want
there's
Councilmember
nothing.
Segurola to go
No,
forward?
I think
No,
you
they
still have
answer,
the
I'll make an
option.
emotion so we can get on if you think.
Well,
I
I
think
think
it's
that
a
was my
great
question. I
idea.
just
It's great to, the work you've done. I don't think it's appropriate at this time,
I don't think, despite my initial reaction, I don't think that I would, at this point, take on an intern, but I'm not opposed to the program or anyone who wants one having one.
Okay, so the question I've put forward is, should Councilmember Segurola continue with putting together the internship program?
So then I would say
for
yes.
for the
everybody,
system,
For
right?
anyone,
system,
but
for the
it,
system.
and it would be though anyone
Correct,
interested.
you're not required to have an in.
No,
I'm just talking about.
I
should-
disagree.
Should we, no, but
That's what the vote is.
That's what the
So
vote
where do
is.
you stand
Okay,
on
let's
that?
No,
call the question.
yes.
I'm
Okay.
asking the
Call the
question.
So we have a
Straw
no,
vote.
a yes.
I'm going to say no.
Mine's a no.
Mine's a no.
And no.
Sorry.
Done deal.
Next item is stormwater question for the Florida Attorney General. Councilmember Segurola.
Actually, can we talk about the boat show first? Switch the order? 3
Absolutely.
and 4?
The 2020 Boat Show and Beyond. Councilmember Segurola.
Okay,
Is that their slogan this year?
yeah. Well,
Beyond.
yes. That's there was an article in the Islander recently, and I think also in the Herald, that the boat show is basically interested in getting a longer-term deal for Virginia Key. And that's fine, but I think instead of being reactive as we've been in the past, I think we need to be proactive and ask the manager to jump in and speak to the boat show people, speak to the county with what our concerns are now that they're putting together the plans for the next boat show and beyond. And that specifically goes towards the traffic concerns. Last year, as you recall, we hired traffic engineers, we did a traffic study, we probably have the best data on the traffic in the causeway that anybody's ever put together. We know what works and we know what doesn't, and we have the numbers to back it up. So I think we should ask the manager to go forward, be proactive.
I move it.
Put the interest, and that may also include, if necessary, at the manager's discretion, the hiring of legal counsel, if necessary. I don't know, because White Sororita can't get involved because they're conflicted out. So I don't know if she's going to require legal counsel or not.
She can come back to us, but Councilmember Petros.
Well, she comes back to us end of January is the proposed date, and the boat show
I
is.
think I can give you some information that might help you.
Okay.
I spoke to one of the organizers, Kathy, who puts on this boat show. She called me today because she had seen that it was, somehow she got informed it's on her agenda. And I had met with them last year with Chief Press, actually, dealing with traffic. And the idea of having a long-term deal is not happening at this point. It's not in their best interests or the city of Miami right now, so they are continuing with their evergreen contract, which means
that they have the right to refuse it every 360 days. So there's like a 5-day window where that decision gets made. And she had told me this last year, she reiterated it this year. There is no desire to increase the size of this boat show, nor to increase the attendance. Now, we know that the attendance is large. It's about $100,000 people for the weekend. And the bulk of the attendance is Saturday and Sunday. They did make some changes last year to help with a more stable barrier between the median and do some other things. Some people feel the traffic was better. Some people feel it was worse. I don't see a threat of anything different than what we've been experiencing for the last 4 years. After this year, this is the 5th year. They are going to have a conversation with the city of Miami because that happens every 5 years with their contract, but it's not going to change and become an extended deal.
Was any part of the conversation covering what the traffic plan is?
The traffic plan is meant to be the same as it was last year.
Okay. And the one last year, if I recall, it worked sometimes and there were hiccups other times, correct?
And it was a little worse.
And every year has been progressively
every year
worse.
has gotten progressively worse.
Well,
I don't know if that's true.
I don't know if that's fair. I mean, their attendance, I think, has been
Let
a
me
little
say
higher.
that again. In my personal experience,
I will agree with Councilmember.
I would also like to say when those negotiations do happen, I think it's an excellent point to try to start working on it now to see what can be done. But my concern would go beyond traffic. And I would just put forth that when they initially came, there was talk of reimbursing us for our additional costs that we incur for, say, public safety. And that hasn't happened. And if there's any, and certainly that this really goes to a point Councilmember Laredo often makes, this is a political thing too, for us to be putting pressure that we would like to be considered and included and to have those public safety dollars budgeted for and promised and actually.
And I think it's a good point.
We're still waiting for payment for Metro.
I moved early. Thank you for interrupting me, because then he threw in the lawyers and stuff. What I wanted to do, I thought it was to be proactive. They have a new commissioner, newly elected. Whatever else we did fairly well with Ultra, considering we don't own Virginia Key, and so that philosophy needs to continue to be nourished. And I think we need to reach out to our elected officials. We have enough contacts in the city of Miami because we have to live with them, for long. So that's why I jumped at we need to start acting now and also remind ourselves that on the Virginia Key Advisory Board, we have 2 former mayors.
Right.
One of whom was here, Vernon and Rasco. So we need to really the charge would be for her to start reaching out and for us individually to start reaching out constructively and do not ever mention lawyer or consultants.
Right. And hold on. We're going to go around. I've got to call into Mayor Suarez. We're supposed to talk about a few things about the Causeway because the Causeways, we're creating a good relationship. I feel like we're moving forward with them in terms of relationship. We have a standing meeting with Commissioner Russell to discuss, and it's his district. So we'll bring these up. But I think more importantly, our chief has been working with the city of Miami and the county on the Causeway. So I think that if we're going to have the manager do anything, I think the direction is really to make that happen so that we know what's going on so we can get that report back. So that is really, but yeah, as to the ability for the manager to hire an attorney, I want that to be clear. I'm not advocating that position. And I think that we want to be very careful because when they hear across the bridge, I know that wasn't your intent. Right. I know you were trying to make it as a safeguard. But when the Councilmember Laredo's point that we're talking lawyers, we're not talking lawyers. We want to have a discussion and that's it. Councilmember Petros and then Councilmember Segarola.
I would just say I agree with you that the manager and Chief Press and whoever else is involved in organizing our boat show weekend here at the Village should as a standing
And I think they
not
did.
order, but something that they do every year is have those meetings, talk to them, find out if there's changes, so that we're aware of anything that's happening either in our favor or to our detriment, because we always need to be aware of it. And it obviously is a large imposition for our residents and our community that exists every year.
The reason I threw in lawyers is that our next meeting, our proposed schedule is until the end of January. The boat show is right after. If the manager, and I don't know, she might
Well,
not.
we could go to a special meeting.
Special meeting
But
anytime
if the
we need it.
manager feels she needs legal advice, she can't get it from Weiss Rota because they're conflicted out. I think,
I don't think that's true.
But
I mean, we represent developers and other government entities all the time at the city of Miami. We just can't sue them.
Yeah.
So,
Litigation.
and I don't, I mean, so I don't think that's correct.
actually, this isn't against the city of Miami. I see the involvement more with the boat show people and Miami-Dade County.
Then that's even more further.
I thought they were conflicted out of the county also.
We sue the county all the time.
Right.
And
Then I
we
take-
have no
then I take it
conflict
back.
with the boat show.
Then I take it back. My
Vice
mistake.
Mayor.
Okay, I think,
Fine with moving this forward.
Yeah,
yes.
And I agree 100% with what
Look,
you guys
I'm
said.
glad that you're spending time with the mayor. We need to spend a little time, and we need to spend time with them without complaining.
Without conflict.
You know, we
Working
don't need
together.
to go with, you know, it's once in a while, just show up and say hi, because the professionals work well, but then, you know, it gets to the political, and there
And
is,
then again, to the point
Russell
of
got
resiliency.
reelected, and then we have the La Portilla, new one.
And Mayor,
And
if you'd
then,
like, I can give an update also on a couple of things we've done with regard to the emergency action plan for the causeway.
Please.
So as a result of this item being here in my briefing with Councilmember Segurola, I did reach out to the manager's office to see if there was any action on their revocable license agreement, and there was nothing there. I also reached out to my contacts with the boat show to see if there was any changes or anything significant that they were aware of. So we're in touch with them, and based on the discussion tonight, I think the next steps, the chief and I can meet with the boat show folks and the officers who are establishing the MOT and make sure that we reflect on any lessons learned from last year. We're also going to be doing the shuttle again, which I think our residents were really happy with, the Petros Express, the Press Express, whatever we call it. That was, I think, a value added to our residents. And we're also moving forward on the emergency causeway access plan. We anticipate within the next few weeks to have the first segment presented to us from the county in coordination with the city of Miami as well. And ultimately, that access plan will be presented before the council as a resolution for adoption with an MOU between us, the county, and the city of Miami, establishing some of these basic parameters under which we would operate for ingress and egress for events. So hopefully, I think we're meeting the intent of this item.
Councilmember Petros.
So you're working.
One favor I would ask
That was never
of you, as you have these meetings, is to continually see if there's a way for us to get the dedicated lane off the island, which I know we haven't been able to do, but we should, I think, continue to always try to see if we can get that concession through these large events.
Concession, I'm sorry,
A dedicated lane for residents
during the events?
during the events.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we can, I mean, I'm not saying it's happening, but I don't think we should ever give
trying.
up.
Yeah, okay,
If
fair
you
enough.
keep asking,
All right.
eventually, maybe.
So we're good. Next item?
Next item, stormwater. I apologize, the manager's report.
Why, it's not 9?
It's for 8 o'clock.
Well, but the manager's report, ongoing project update, okay. I just want to make sure that dates are,
Ongoing project update, Madam Manager.
Thank you. So we have two items on this format, and thank you for the feedback. I think this is resonating well with folks. So, in essence, with regard to the Federal Shoreline Protection Project, the village authorized one of our continuing services engineering providers to help advance our participation in the feasibility study. Since the November 19th meeting, we have issued the formal NTP. We've had the kickoff meeting with the engineers as well as our lobbyists. We have also, this morning, we had our first biweekly call with the team, which will continue every other week from now moving forward. We are working within the budget. We've clarified any concerns that kind of came up with regard to limits to budget, just just so that we're clear, the council has authorized up to 178. I was not comfortable that the scope was fully flushed or necessary, so we've taken some time to further refine the scope and run it by the Army Corps of Engineers to make sure that we're investing our dollars strategically and intentionally and not, the open checkbook. So we are a little bit behind schedule, but I think we will meet the next milestone, which is the January 6th deliverable when the BCR benefit cost ratio will be delivered to the village in its conceptual form.
By the consultant?
By the consultant.
And then when is it scheduled to go to the Army Corps?
So part of our work plan includes check-ins with the Army Corps throughout the entire process. So they'll be checking in with us. We've identified what segments we're going to use for the sampling, and we'll present those to the Army Corps. So we'll be working hand in hand with them throughout the whole process.
So can we have a presentation on that at our first meeting in January?
I can ask, and I'll circulate
it's done
an
January
email.
6th.
Right. You would think that we should have something meaningful to say at that point.
Let's pencil it in for the first meeting in January, which is going to be January 14th. Spoiler alert.
That have been brought up that we should be thinking about or addressed on this path?
There was one thing that came up this morning that was interesting to me. So part of the data set that the Army Corps is using for their analysis in other segments, other beaches, is the new FEMA surge data. So the last time FEMA updated their surge reports was in 1992. So right now, within the next 6 to 18-month horizon, we anticipate FEMA releasing their new surge maps, which I think will be a challenging undertaking for FEMA. It'll be highly controversial, as we know from the work in the conference last week. Those surge modeling tools are going to be used by all of us to make, in particular, financial investment decisions. Right. And they're going to be contested, they're going to be challenged. So part of the obstacle that our engineering folks were facing was that they couldn't get access to these preliminary data sets because they have not been fully vetted and made public. So what they asked of us was to see if we knew anybody in FEMA, if we could somehow get some backing to be able to get that data released so that we're using the same Army Corps data. So two things as a result of that. We did have contacts. We have, today we were able to make some of those movements more likely. So we do anticipate FEMA releasing the data set to us, which is good news. What was a little concerning to me about this was based on our experience with our water quality, right, we've got preliminary results that are being used, and I'm interested to see how the Army Corps is going to leverage preliminary FEMA maps in making such substantial investments themselves. And so I think that's something that and thank you for cueing me on that, that's something that we learned today that I think might show itself somewhere in the process.
Sorry, say that again?
So
how do we get an answer for that?
Yeah.
With regard to the data, or how these delay might...
they're able to use that, and what does that mean? What is the ramification?
We need to ask and say, how are you guys going to reconcile the fact that you're using this preliminary data? Because I don't know what their answer is, so we're going to have to ask them what their thoughts are.
Okay.
And if you recall, when we were in D.C., there was some, maybe there'll be a delay, maybe this was it.
Well, right. And there may be other things that... Yeah.
Or in Jacksonville, maybe this was it.
Right.
And maybe not. So that's the next step. We're going to follow up on this, on the FEMA. We'll hopefully get the FEMA data, and then thinking in the long term, how might this impact the project timeline and the solutions and the analysis? It all goes together.
Does the FEMA data impact our insurance, and does that get used by the insurance industry also?
It ultimately will, yes.
Okay. I think expecting that was part of us changing our BFE, if I recall, right? That we were anticipating that this was an ongoing thing, and so we tried to be a little bit ahead of it as we could.
That was the rezoning of the flood zones and things like that, which is a little different than surge projections.
They do tie in, and I think they do. Okay. And one thing I think that we're in the RFQ that we put out, that we got proposals on and is currently under evaluation. One of the things that we looked at in our stormwater master plan is we wanted to elevate the level of analysis in planning for our improvements. And one thing that we do is now it's like two-dimensional. So we're not just looking at the rainfall, we're looking at tidal events, we're looking at sea level rise, we're looking at all the different elements of ways water is penetrating our system, and looking at the multifaceted approach and the storm surge based on the 100-year storm that happens now quite, not frequently, but the 50-year storm. Less than 100 years, that's for sure. So these data points are very, very significant and will impact many people's planning horizon and investment.
All right.
And then the second update is on septic. So our format here, we're trying to just kind of keep it simple, counting out the number of homes, and then what we'll be doing is providing a map that identifies the zones that require compliance by certain dates. The legend calls out the date by which each zone needs to be in compliance. And then we've also identified which properties are not in compliance.
So I just had, one question, because your report, should have squeezed my eyes and looked at that. But just to be clear, because you have here sewer connections for Zone 1 is December 29th of this year. That's coming up, right?
That's the second,
and then
right. The first
2 and 3 is June 30th of 2020?
You got it.
Because it says 2019.
I'm sorry, typo.
That's okay. No,
I'm
it's a
sorry.
typo. I just want to be clear, because September 10th of 2019 was when Zone 4
Yes.
was due.
You are correct, sir.
So, no, I want everybody out there to understand
Not in
that it's
violation
not, because actually when I made my correction, I wrote
okay.
September 10th of 2020, and I said, no, that's wrong. They're passed.
They're
So-
passed.
So 2 and 3 actually have until June 30th of 2020. Everybody else needs to be connected. There are 12 houses in Zone 4. Are there any homes in Zone 1?
Yes.
How many?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12.
No, that's Zone 4.
Oh, it's purple.
No, okay, I don't know. I can't read which
I
is
think
which.
you're thinking.
All right.
I think you're thinking the same thing. So on the
Zone 1 has how many
these
left?
are those are the ones that have 12 left that are already past compliance.
That's Zone 4.
That is zone.
There's like 40. I
4.
counted in that little section. There's about 40.
I'm sorry.
or so.
Zone 4 is the deadline that passed
Right.
September.
Right.
That's the first zone that.
And there are 12 in that zone.
Right.
And then how many are coming? I guess my question is
The
for
total is
the one.
172 right now.
Right, but how many are in the next zone that's coming up in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 4
I
weeks,
can
3
count
weeks?
them out, so
2 weeks and
I have
4
to
days.
count them. They're in the.
No, you don't have to
pool.
count. I just was
counted
curious.
like
No,
almost
no,
40.
I
There's
didn't mean to
almost
say
40
it.
there.
Around 40.
There's almost 40
Yeah.
there. Okay, no, I was just curious because again, I think it's good to have it.
They have a little mark on the middle of it.
I don't
No,
know.
that
I
I
can't
see.
read. I can't read the chart.
Maybe we can make it bigger.
You
and
don't have
fold
to make
all
it bigger.
next
No,
time.
it's not necessary.
It's just a
okay.
typo in the
Just
zones,
give me
though.
numbers. Just say.
So
This is how many
today,
houses.
172. We've also launched a Boots on the Ground campaign where we have BZP staff members going door to door for those folks who haven't converted, asking if there were any concerns as to why. Did they know they need to comply? Have they received the notices? Is there any financial hardship? Do they understand why they need to comply? So our success rate in actually making contact with the owner hasn't been great, but we're still going and we're keeping track. One of the metrics we're going to add for this report moving forward is how many contacts we make, how many successful folks we actually talk with. And then I also have tomorrow on the 12th of December at 11 a.m., I do have a call with the folks from from Durham, from the regulatory agency to ask what other strategies we can pursue to help them.
But at some point, it's going to be, look, turn it over to Durham for enforcement because, I want us to work with our neighbors, but it's September 10th. It's 3 months now. It's 90 days. They have not, those 12 homes have not come into compliance. You've done everything. You've sent certified letters. I'm assuming some of them are investment properties, so there's a registered agent. You've sent something to everybody. You've gone around. I think
We've
Javier's gone around
Boots
and knocked on doors.
It's actually BZP staff, not Public Works.
Okay. So, but somebody's going around knocking on the door saying, hey, and
The
leaving
folks
something.
and the folks who understand the process. So it's actually the regulatory folks who would be issuing the
Right.
permit, so they
So-
can understand help
So my
people
point
understand.
is, you can only lead a horse to water. You can't make them drink, right? So I think at some point we've got to turn it over to Durham and have them enforce.
Aren't they already turned over to Durham?
Yes, so Durham is enforcing. I'll find out a little bit more on my meeting on the 12th to what extent they're dedicating resources to this. I think it's sort of a priority and a bandwidth issue for them. So I'm curious to see how important this is to the county. So we should find out on the 12th.
Okay.
I have a question here. I noticed that the property across the street from me is on the map is still septic, but there's no house on it. It's a vacant piece of land. I don't know. I mean, there's nothing, they can't connect anything, but if they sell it or decide to build on it, they wouldn't be able to connect to septic. So technically, they're kind of in that gray zone, but they're technically not on septic anymore, but they're not connected to the sewer. And there might also be some construction projects out there that might still show septic, but they're under construction. I don't know if we should identify which ones those are, because that 174 might drop down to 158 or something like that when we start considering a couple of those things that there's no way they can hook back up to septic anywhere. They're already in that process or they're vacant.
And what we can do, so if you have that feedback, please give this to us, because the data that we have is in part from village data, but it's also from WASD, because if folks are paying a water bill, the assumption is that they're getting water and their septic has been closed off, and it's not always the case.
Yeah.
So as we're reconciling the data and as we're making these site visits, as we're gaining more information, we're letting the county know, and we're also updating our records. So to everybody, if there's something here that you think isn't right, please do let us know, and we'll further refine our data.
Okay.
Am I to assume then all the commercial properties are on septic?
No. So the commercial properties were to come into compliance about a decade ago. There are...
A decade?
A decade. So we are aware of some properties that are still on septic, and we're trying to work with them to help them come up with cost-effective ways. One solution in particular is it's costly for them to get off septic because of the distance to the pipe that they need to connect to. So we're trying to leverage we're trying to give them a closer access point to connect to. So we're trying to work with folks to help come into compliance. With regard to the commercial strip malls, that I can't speak to. I don't know if we know offhand. So for the next report, I can circulate an email, but we can circle back and get you the answer to that question.
But this map is only showing the sewer project that we did 10 years ago. This is not showing other people who might be on septic that may not have been part of this.
So the sewer project basically was the northern part of the island. So if you can tell, none of these zones. I'm sorry, the southern part. So everybody north of the island already had the older infrastructure that was inherited by the county when the original private developer who put in the infrastructure deeded the asset over to the county. Everything in the zones below was part of the sewer project. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
No, I think what I'm trying to say is that this map is really only for that new sewage project that mandated people to hook up. There may still be other properties that are not showing up here that could be on septic.
You can say that.
In the older...
No, that are not on this map.
No. He's talking about the beach club.
They have the little
Well, that's
blue dots
one
still.
example, but there could be others
They have the little
out there
blue
that
dots.
may. I don't know. I'm just wondering. Like, is the beach club
Jake,
the
are there
only
any homes
one,
north
or
of Heather that are
Yeah,
on septic?
they have little blue. Yeah, they're on here. There's the little blue dots.
oh,
We
I see
definitely
them
have to
off.
clean the map
Yeah,
up
I
a
see
little
a
bit.
couple of them there.
There
So
are a
they're
handful.
also mandated to hook up. Even though they're off of
So
that.
according to the zones that were established that we got from the county, and that what we've been noticing for the past, I don't know, at least four or 5 years, I would say, this is the data that we have. When I meet with the folks from Durham on the 12th, that's something that I can clarify, how they make these determinations. Because we have found in going through this process and helping the county that they're making certain assumptions, like if you're paying your water bill, that you've already tapped off your septic, but we don't have any records, for example, of that having happened, possibly because it was before we incorporated.
What about the condos? Are any condos, are those all on sewer?
The condos are not part of this, right?
They're all on
But
sewer.
are they all on sewer?
I believe they're all on sewer,
Yes. All
yes.
sewer.
That'd be a
Yes.
big field. But even in Moscow, there's one.
Septic, yeah, maybe like a gazebo or something, but I can't imagine that's the case.
On Moscow.
Right. All right.
All right,
Thank you.
thank
If there
you.
is any misinformation here, this exercise is taking many different data sources, so please help us refine it if there are any mistakes.
Thank you for the
Could you send a more
information.
higher resolution of this? that we could look at?
Yes,
That would
yes,
be
we
great.
can.
Awesome.
All right, next item.
Next item, Mayor, we're back to 11A3, stormwater question for the Florida Attorney General, Councilmember Segurola.
Okay, what each of you received this morning is a working draft of the question that we've been putting together. I apologize for it getting to you guys late. There was a miscommunication between Chad and I. But basically, that's what I put together so far with input from Don Ellsberg, who you heard from today during public comment. He's probably worked on this the longest of anyone in the village. What I would ask each of you is to look over the draft, meet with the attorney, and give them any feedback on whatever positions you have to maybe in January have the a
Do it
final
at the first
version.
meeting in January.
That's pretty much it.
Perfect. Thank you.
That sounds good.
Is Climate Summit Conference, Councilmember Petros, as well as Councilmember Laredo.
Yes, well, we, with our manager and Jake, who, the head of Public Works, and Kat, who does our GIS, everybody was down attending the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Leadership Summit. And this is been going on for 11 years. I think Councilmember McCormick went last year. It was in Miami. And it includes 4 counties, Monroe, Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach. And it's really 3 days of discussions about what's going on in our communities regarding sea level rise and looking at ways to improve how we impact our environment. And then this one in particular went outside of our area. There was a gentleman from Siberia who was telling us what was happening at the permafrost level. We had insurance agents or an actuarial panel talking about the impacts of insurance and how they evaluate their rates and what could be happening in the future. This is not new information. I actually asked the staff, and I was thinking about it myself, what are some of the takeaways that I felt in this, and hopefully Councilmember Laredo can tell you his, but one is the state, and not only local, but the state level of politicians are really starting to pay more and more attention to this. And I think one of the messages also was not only that we can potentially get money at the state level to deal with this, but that now they're looking at the federal level. And as most of you know, or all of you know, that the governor appointed a chief resiliency officer who we had the opportunity to meet. And I think, Mayor Davey, you met her in Washington when you were up there. And she's very motivated. She knew about Key Biscayne. She even was nice enough to tell us that it was on her short list of places that she's looking into, which I thought was great. And the other thing was we do need to be, I think as a community, some of the things I would like to see us doing, and this is probably true for all of these places, but we need more action. We need to put some action in place, and we need to figure out what those measures are. We do have a lot of things happening within our village. The zoning matrix that's going on right now is one of the huge, big steps forward, I think, to help prepare us to be more resilient. I think they had a nice discussion about solar. I think we need to really think as a council on how to incentivize solar, and the idea of living shorelines, which would be more resilient for storms as well, and try to think a little bit out of the box. Maybe also, I mean, we've discussed this idea of having less permeable surfaces. Let's take away some of the concrete. And another one was the idea the technology is there to reuse our wastewater. And one of the things, because we are a small island, we can be a pilot for many different things. And I think that wasn't something discussed here, but it's something that we should try to figure out how to formalize and start making some specific asks. So those are the main things that I got. The one other thing I'll add, in January, the University of Miami is doing a Miami Climate Symposium, January 22nd through the 24th, and they're bringing it's a little more science-based, but they're bringing some really interesting people to have a discussion, and I believe that our community foundation is actually going to sponsor that. I don't know. One of the ideas I also thought we're already working with the University of Miami on our water issues, but we may want to start thinking about how do we as a municipality connect with some of these research organizations and support them to try to work together to be on the front end of this. And maybe it is in something like this symposium.
Absolutely. Awesome.
You jogged my memory on two things, if I may add to that. So while we were at the conference, one of our partners sent me an email about a National League of Cities Leadership and Community Resilience Program application. And as we were there, I wasn't looking at Vogue magazine. I was filling out a grant application, and I did it on the spot, and I submitted the application, and we should hear back by Friday, February 1st. So this is something politically, National League of Cities, it's not big in monetary value, but the project that I submitted was to help us become part of the Federal Shore Protection Program, and I hadn't included that in my report. So I'll share that with you, and that's something anybody that you know in the League of Cities to help garner that support. And the second thing you reminded me of, and I'm sorry, Councilmember Cigarola, back to internships, one of the things the county suggested that we do was partner with FIU, in particular for resilience interns. So it may not meet legislative aid level, but so we have we're working with the county staff, and we're working with, I believe it's FIU. Yes, FIU. So we've reached out with them, and hopefully we can maybe get some interns that would support some of the staff work on resilience.
Awesome.
Did you talk to the chief resiliency
Councilmember
officer?
Laredo?
Yes.
Oh, an excellent
Go ahead.
report. I think I would only add that my biggest takeaway is meeting this very impressive woman, well, two impressive women. One is the resilience director of the state of Florida you met. It is in the spirit, in a very divided country that we live in, was very refreshing. There was almost a bipartisan. There's a quote, right-wing Republican being very out front governor on this issue, and the Secretary of Agriculture and Consumer Affairs, which is a cabinet. We forget sometimes that this is a weak governor state governance. You know, it's a cabinet type of government. And she's a voting member of the cabinet and from South Florida, very sensitive to this area. So that's, again, so that we can develop these relationships. And the most striking thing was, at the end, with Jake is spending time with the resilience officer, touring what they're doing in Key West, and I just go by. It really reinforced my philosophy. Well, let's do something. A couple of times I mentioned study fatigue. You could see the little things that they do in Key West to make a difference. There are sun panels at the parking lot. I understand that we spend maybe $25,000 a month, more or less, in our village area here. They have those covered panels that also serve to cool the cars that are parked, let's say, in this thing. So it's just, I can go on and on and on, but while they're doing this big solution, they're doing specific things. The parking area with the city hall, which is one of the themes that was developed by one of the panelists in that beach nourishment that we had here, which is, while we do the studies, let's start doing things. And that should be my takeaway, to inspire our manager to do these little things, because also people, our voters are looking for something tangible. And we can do some things right away while we wait for all these studies. So I thought it was very productive, to me, very educational. And the other thing is that it permeates the organizations. They don't have it, as I thought before, well, let's hire somebody so be politically correct. No, they're...
It's everything. It touches on everything.
Exactly.
No, I think
that would be my feedback.
Thank you all for going.
Thank you all for going, and let's keep at it.
Next item, proposed 2020 Village Council meeting schedule.
Okay, I got the list. I would like to add one meeting for January 14th. I think we have a large number of items. To your point about if we're going to talk about the boat show, if anything was to come up, we have a lot of issues. I want us to get going. We've only got, if we don't have that, we only have 11 council meetings, because 4 of the meetings that are up there are a community workshop, budget workshop, a community group budget workshop, a budget workshop, and 2 budget hearings. To the point you just made about getting going on things, let's get going on things. The resiliency projects that we can be talking about, I'd like people to come back in the new year and be fired up and get going. You know, the zoning matrix, projects for the 2040, or what did you say, 2020 and beyond? I like it. I think we have to be looking at what we can do. I'm going to work over the holidays. I want to talk to the Chamber of Commerce. You know, they've made strides in marketing this community, but we have to do better. We have to do more. Our residents are right, and they should expect that we should be out there pushing this community to the world at large. So I want to see, I'm asking Dad one meeting. That's all I'm asking for on January 14th. Then I would recommend that we do the town hall on police policy that was requested. I'd like to do that on a Thursday. Why can't we do that on either January 16th or January 23rd? Doesn't have to be on a Tuesday. That's a town hall. That's just simply, you know, the folks coming in and asking questions of our police chief as to what policies are and what, you know, what we do in this town as far as policing our village.
Well, no, wait a minute. Before we move from that, that is not certainly what I brought up before and what I thought we approved. I thought it was, I mean, it's all obviously open. It should be here to the public to educate it. And I, as an elected official, I, as a representative of people who voted for it, to understand better.
Well, we would
and
be
impact. I understand, but it's not just a workship. It's supposed to be a special
town hall. It'd be a special. That's what
whatever
I'm saying.
you call it, but it should be formal. It should be. I think I saw the agenda that you put together with the chief.
Right.
It's about exploring and learning from everything. You know, as a one-term. 1 year in this term, and I think it's we've had issues. Some of us different in issues, but we need to have. This is a big part of our budget and the number one priority for our village. So I mean,
What
I
I'm
don't.
talking
I
about is
wouldn't.
putting it on its own day. Having.
I
a
understand,
special,
but I thought that day was the 14th, and now you're asking.
Well, I'm saying the 16th. We haven't picked a day
No,
for the
I
town
understand that. My concern. Let me just ask you a couple of questions.
Shoot.
The one of it is legal. You know, this is discussed at the village formation. Too many meetings. Again, because of the philosophy that we don't want to micromanage. We're now up to 16 meetings.
No, sir, we're not. We only have 11 meetings here.
Well, there's 15.
Four of them are on budget.
Well, but the problem is, when are they going to have time to work? The people that we pay. I mean, this includes minutes, includes preparation. I don't know what cannot wait until January 28th.
We used to do 18 meetings a year.
Well, from my experience in managing, it's not very efficient, and it's clearly not what was intended in the formation. That is precise. This is how we get into micromanaging.
Who's talking about micromanaging?
Well, 18 meetings in 12 months is micromanaging.
No, I'm talking about adding one meeting. I'm talking about adding one meeting.
But it's a total of 16.
So it'd be 17.
Can I add something there?
Of 17. Okay, let me, and then I have, go ahead.
No,
I have
it'd be 16.
I just wanted to.
16 instead of 15. We'd have 16
But
meetings.
the charter calls, after a long discussions, Betty, I'm sorry she left, who was one of the founders. We had this issue and we talked about, 11, because we did not want to do, it all has, it's basic in the charter. We want to make sure that we set policy and let them work.
That's right.
And we review it. When you're meeting more than once a month, it gets, first of all, when do they have time to meet? They have to prepare agendas. They have to prepare minutes. I mean, this can be a slippery slope. And I understand the intent is good, but I don't believe it's good in efficient governance. That's one issue. The other one that I learned, because it's amazing if you just walk around, people with the common sense will teach you something. The community group budget workshop, which sounded such a great idea, and after such incredible feedback, Todd, for your event over the weekend and parents, I don't know that was the low point for me in this council, that whole thing with the community groups. And the intent here is to hide, but to put them separate, it's less than 600. It's almost like if they have to beg. I just feel that could be part of the June 33. It is the one area that our taxpayers can see the impact of their money, like Winterfest and other things. And somebody mentioned to me, made a comment, I thought that makes a lot of sense, because I was for it. It looks like you're being picked because we have to really look at your stuff and it stands out. I know that's not the intent, but it comes out that way. It should be an integral part of the budget process. We already have applications. That is one discipline that we need to do. But to have him come up here almost begging, I don't know that that's a good thing.
Can I
But I
just,
could be,
sorry,
but I could be
just
wrong.
want to comment on that, and I don't know if my comment will help you at all, but traditionally until this year, at the budget workshop, it was a time that all the community groups seeking funding came, and their presentations varied from like, hey guys, it's me again, to a full PowerPoint. And it never felt like begging. It felt more like highlighting and appreciating and giving them an opportunity to speak. This year we tried it differently, and I think actually that's why it was a low point. And I think the diversion away from it caused more problems. I think this is going back to something that did always work.
Within the budget meeting.
Well, we used to do it in the budget workshop.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
What would happen was that it really became a meeting about the community groups, and we didn't get to workshop the budget. So my feeling in breaking them apart and doing it this way, and of course, I could be wrong, but I thought that given our budget experience last year, this would give us an opportunity to give the right time and attention to the community groups, and then also have time to really workshop the budget. The manager, it will be her second full budget. She knows what she wants to do differently. But if we have a full meeting to devote to workshopping the budget, she then has the summer months to implement and do whatever our suggestions are to bring it back in September. So that's why I think it makes sense to break it apart. And I take your points, but just to share my experience, having them come to the podium, I think worked and was positive.
Vice Mayor?
So my experience with having less meetings, I understand what you're saying and the micromanaging part, but there's other pieces that we typically take part in these meetings is the ability to talk to each other. And what I've noticed is that when we reduced the meetings, when I was up on the dais the second year we were here, we decided to reduce the meetings. I was not in favor because I was very nervous what would happen, and it happened. We got agendas this thick, and we couldn't get through all of them. We couldn't get through, and we kept carrying over to the next meeting. And that's why I brought up the idea of starting the meeting at 6, because we couldn't get anything. We couldn't get it all done. So it makes me a bit nervous is that when we make the meetings less, we have less chances to talk to each other. Our discussion items become extremely long. Stuff that you need to prove starts piling up. So we had to weigh that a little bit to make sure that you guys can get whatever you need to get done, and we can at least have discussions. So maybe if you don't give us anything in a meeting, we can at least have some discussions of our ideas. And then going to the idea about the community groups, I agree with both of you. I think really the issue is how do we conduct this meeting? I think that's the real thing, because I think the problem that we had the last years was that we were kind of put in a position where make a decision on what you want and what you don't want today, and it may be just better to listen who is looking for whatever without really any response of whether we're going to include it or not include it. But I don't know if that's what you're looking for, because you may want to say, well, I want to bring to the workshop to already know who we're including or not, but we have to be real careful of making those selections without seeing the whole budget. I mean, we really can't be in this vacuum and start discussing community groups only without seeing the whole budget. So I think maybe it's more of a listening presentation to us workshop, and then when we get to the actual budget workshop, then we start discussing stuff that we've already been briefed on by the community groups. I don't know why it has to happen on April 7th. I mean, it almost, because again, what makes me nervous is we have a meeting on March 10th, and then our next council meeting is April 28th. It's a month and a half before we ever discuss anything. And I believe that when we get to April 28th, we're looking at an agenda that thick easily, and we'll see if we can even get through it on the 28th. If not, it's going to continue to carry. It's a snowball, just keeps getting pushed over to the next meeting. So we have to be a little bit careful of that. I don't know why the community groups have to be April 7th. Why not have it between June 9th and June 23rd, so it's fresh in our head what they presented right before we have the budget workshop? I mean, it could be just a little 1 hour meeting, just having everybody present everything and bring it in, and we could turn the April 7th into an actual council meeting, so we don't have this giant month and a half gap of nothing, no activity happening.
Or maybe move that to the 14th, sorry.
Or moving the 14th, whatever.
Just a recommendation,
Yes,
if
please.
possible. We could put 2 budget workshops and call it Budget Workshop 1 and Budget Workshop 2, instead one not back to back, maybe June 9th and June 23rd, and not designating, so you allow more time.
But then we're doing nothing from May 19th until August 25th other than budget issues.
No, turn April 7th into a regular council meeting, right? And then
But then
changing
from
June
May
9th.
19th
Oh, I see.
to
May
August
19th.
It has to
25th.
be in the, I'm not opposed to the, sorry, my mic's not on. I don't oppose to the idea of it being an addition, and again, to Mike's point, doesn't have, I'm not married, that it has to be a Tuesday. But I think the idea of separating it out to really give them the time, and I actually like, and I think this might help to your concerns about wanting to maintain their, their integrity and respect for what they're doing, having it on a separate day from actually getting down to the numbers may be helpful with that too, because it's not like, nice what you said, but I can't give it to you, rather than to take it, to digest it, and then to sit down with the numbers and make our decisions based solely on how much money we think we're going to have and how much we can give. May be helpful.
Councilmember Petros.
A couple things. I am very sensitive to the quantity of time and effort it takes for the staff to get us our stuff for these meetings. And I do think that if we're meeting every 2 weeks, they pretty much can't do much in between those two meetings other than prepare us to have our next discussion. And so that concerns me. And I don't know, but I hear what you're saying, that we can't talk unless we're here. And I know there used to be something where you would do a regular meeting and then you'd have a zoning meeting, and those probably were both but I don't know if they were equally time intensive on the staff. It would be nice if we could have some meetings.
But our first 3 years, or first 2 years, we had 2 meetings a month. I never heard complaints about the agenda. And the one thing I don't get is why it's harder to do like half of it a week apart or 2 weeks apart as opposed to the whole thing. And maybe that's just something I don't understand. But if our meetings went, after Gary suggested we go down to one a month and our agenda's got like a Bible every time, that had to have taken like all the time to do. And Jenny, you could probably speak to this because you were in the manager's office doing it. So what my question is it that impactful to do it half and spread in 2 meetings as opposed to those monster agendas in one? It's really a question.
So thank you for being considerate. It definitely is it's hard on staff to be putting together the agendas for logistical reasons, for technology reasons, for the level of review that I am taking on each item. And I'm spending a lot of time, and you'll see sometimes that we want to bring items forth, but if I'm not fully comfortable with an understanding of the operation or the fiscal impact, or that the analysis was thorough, or that we followed our rules, I'm not allowing a lot of those items to go. And so I wasn't here before. I'm not sure, what happened. We can speak to that, and I'll learn from those lessons. For us now, in the rhythm that we're in, just to kind of give a sense of volume, we've got about 6 significant solicitations out on the street, including the design criteria package for stormwater, including the survey for the utility and right-of-way work, the LED retrofit at the community center. So there's, our horticulturalist, there's quite a few things that we're moving on. And Councilmember Laredo is correct that to be able to, today alone, we had 4 hours of interviews for the horticulturalist that consumed 3 of our senior people. Then there are opportunities where, the beautification board wants to meet with folks as well. So there are a lot of pulls on staff. And to the discussion, Mayor, that we had earlier today, it's not, I think it's a nice cadence perhaps to have an agenda where, and to Councilmember Petros' point, that the actionable items, items that have been discussed, that have been flushed out, where I have a manager's report, where we've gone through our process, we have the legislation attached, we do the briefings, like those items, you know, they're moving. When we have those items on the consent calendar and we're putting all of our time in preparation for the meeting, those meetings went really quickly, if you recall. Those consent calendars moved quickly. So maybe there is an opportunity to set some sort of rhythm that gives us time to work the processes and vet the ideas and bring you action items, and then maybe set another opportunity where it's not so intense on us. We're not preparing memos. We're coming in to listen, you know. And even now, what discussion items, you know, many of the items I don't see until the agenda goes out, and so literally the agenda goes out. Now I'm spending time trying to track down what is the intent of the item, what are we doing, where did this come from. And
Those
then
are generally discussion items, right?
Right. And so the challenge that I'm having is that, you know, those items aren't they're not being discussed with me in advance. And so now not only am I preparing the actionable items, getting to the agenda print date, right, which I think we're getting in a rhythm there, but then I'm spending the next 4 or 5 days figuring out what the discussion items are, because there is an expectation that I come prepared to speak to some of these things, and I don't know what they are. So not only is the actionable item consuming, but the discussion items are also consuming.
Councilmember Segarola, because I've put him off.
There's a lot to be said for having a couple more meetings with much shorter agendas. But at the same time, I guess I'm going to repeat, I don't want to overburden staff if you just don't have enough time to prepare for the meetings. I guess my concern is the spacing of these meetings just isn't very uniform. There's a lot that are 2 weeks apart, and then some that are a month apart. Can that, I mean, like February 11th.
Tuesday of every month. Holidays,
yeah, holidays.
Spring break,
Right,
spring
but
break.
like February 11th to March 10th. Spring break is in March.
At the end.
Public school spring break is
So
in
public
March.
school and private school, so
Right.
they're a week apart from each
We
other.
could do
Takes into
February
cons-
18th,
But that's worse.
right? Or is that's the boat show?
that is,
No, it's after the boat
It's
show.
1 month.
that's after the boat show, if I'm not mistaken.
See, there's,
I
yeah,
was taking into account,
Or bump it up January 21st, you know, to not have it.
I've played with these dates. It's difficult sometimes because of the school schedule and
you know, to
What do you think?
the mayor and to the manager's point, I understand that maybe maybe we want to have certain meetings, maybe every third meeting or something, where we're trying to put more idea items on rather than action items, if that's the way. But my feeling is
Ideas keep coming up. I think
the
if you
ideas
wait
are
too
always
long-
that's the issue, and I just feel like, look, we've got to get things done, and we've only, you know, what I'm asking for is basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 action meetings, non-budget related. That's all. That's what I'm asking for. We've got a lot. That's one a month where we're meeting on issues that face this community. We got a lot going on. You know,
But may
I feel like, you know, I apologize, Vice Mayor. You go. You
Mine's going to be quick. Just something that we need to think about. So there's a burden on you guys, staff. There's a burden on us too. So if we're looking at every 2 weeks, let's just say, for instance, I know we're not looking at that, but more meetings and getting smaller agendas that have 6 action items and legislative items that we need to look at. I'd rather have that in the 3 or 4 days that we have to review the agenda than having 12 or 14 action items to review, because it's harder on us to figure out what we need to do in order to get that approved and going.
More time to review, where it's not like we
Yeah.
get an additional week. We don't get it a week and a half in advance if there's 14 items as opposed to the 5 or 6.
Exactly. And there is another benefit on your side too, even though I understand the burden, but there are certain things that you need to get done and you need approval from us in order to move it. I feel like that idea that you're talking about is fine, but I was just thinking about this from the days. I know we talked about this before, but I'm almost sure that the first person that's going to break that rule is going to be you guys, because like, man, I got to get this approved by you guys to get this through, because I got to get these guys on board or whatever it is in order to start this project. I can't wait another 4 weeks or 3 weeks to get that to you guys. So I'm breaking it. I know this is supposed to be just discussion, so I'm going to bring that up. So it's something that we need to
in writing, could you?
Yeah.
And Councilmember McCormick, I just want to interject, you know, if we do schedule meetings and we find, oh, it's so light, We have actually canceled meetings before in the past. We had a time where somebody
This
said,
isn't a light one.
you know, well, this wouldn't have been a light, but we have had that. So Councilmember McCormick.
So I appreciate what you said about the discussion items and hadn't thought of it from that perspective, that when you see it, it's like, what are they getting at?
Right.
So I think maybe.
Yeah, that's on us.
That's on us, but also it's on, now that we know it, it's on us, right? So perhaps there should be some sort of understanding that if we're going to put something on as a discussion item that is going to involve you, that we give you more lead time and that we let you know that it's coming.
That'd be great.
And that we need to also have the same expectation that if we, like we used to do all the time, we added discussion items at the meeting.
Right.
That if we're doing things like that, there can be absolutely no expectation that you're going to have been prepared, right? That there are times that we put things on simply to talk to each other about because we can't otherwise. Right. But, you know, I hear what you're saying and I appreciate it. And I don't know how guilty I've been of it, but I will,
do better.
Pay attention to that.
Councilmember Laredo.
Yeah, this is very good feedback, but, the phrase, and I know you didn't mean it that way, but to get things done is exactly what we're not supposed to be doing. We're not supposed to be getting things done. They're supposed to be getting things done. We're supposed to be getting policies. When you get into these kinds of numbers of meetings, and I include myself, and particularly, and I remind ourselves because I blame her for not bringing back the strategic retreat we did at the Ritz-Carlton, where we had a very good discussion about that we have a burden to stop putting burden on them and putting inefficiency on them. And under discussions, we come up with 27 different great ideas. We have a small little island at 35 million, and we need to focus on making that management efficiently. So it is precisely because I don't want to be, nor was this form, for us to get things done, that I think we should do less meetings. As it relates to legal contracts or things that need to be signed off, just like in corporate America, I believe you can have consent agreement in writing, can you not? If she needs an approval from 7 of us that is timely, we don't have to call a meeting necessarily. We can do it by phone, we can do it by consent. I'm trying to make sure that we understand our role and we stick to what we already got a big thing on our plate, and getting things done is their responsibility. And 17 meetings, which I'm counting.
No, 16 if I add
okay,
one.
well, it's still 16. It's a lot of work for them. It just really is a lot of work for them, and there's not much to do. This is
respectfully, I completely disagree with that.
What is it that you want to get done that you can do as a mayor?
We as a council should be setting policy on resiliency, setting projects up to be getting done.
She's supposed to be getting it done.
Well, they should be coming back to us then. And
So we took the zoning code matrix, for example. We came up with a public participation plan. We laid out a 6-month plan. We are executing on the plan. If there's any interim status reports, I can meet with you one-on-one.
No, but I want it to be in the public. Interim one-on-one meetings are not effective to the village moving forward.
What decisions need to be made as we go through our work?
I understand, but I want meetings. I want people to be engaged in this village. Part of it is public discourse. Part of it is us talking to one another up here. That's part of the important process. So I want an additional meeting is what I'm asking for on January 14th. I would like to ask that I'm moving for a January 14th meeting to be added to this.
Well, what happened to the meeting on January 14th that was supposed to be on the
well, that's what I was suggesting for January 16th. It's not
that's
on
another
this.
meeting.
But that's a town hall.
Well, you call it a town hall meeting, but it's that. I philosophically have a difference.
And you've made that point clear. I've called the question.
I know, but I'm telling you, and I want to have more directness from my professionals, including you, Jennifer. Really, feel secure that we're burdening you, and you got to tell us, because we come from the right place. We're trying to do the right thing, but in the process, we may be making your managing impossible. Our police department, our fire department, they have to be here.
Chad, can you give us some understanding of what other communities do? And you've probably been sitting up here the longest and been through many administrations. Can you give some thoughts to us?
So originally there was the council and there was the zoning hearings. You guys had 2 a month. That's because at the original, after incorporation, there was a lot of zoning items. That zoning, even though it was called the zoning meeting, became a council meeting, and it became 2 meetings a month. Then you went through a trend of dropping that, whereas the mayor said the council, and I think the mayor was on the council at the time, that they dropped that second meeting, even though it was on the calendar. So I mean, I will say that other communities have 1 meeting a month and they don't get huge books. I think it's all how you manage it. It is a big burden on the staff. Because I think after you have a council meeting tonight, if you had one in 2 weeks, the agenda deadline is
This Friday.
It's this Friday. So like we're kind of, it's like a rat race. So I think that look, I'm fine with this schedule here. If you wanted to have more meetings, obviously I'm here to serve you guys. The issue with the 14th, Mayor, I'll just say is because of that agenda deadline, I don't know what everybody else's that staff's holiday schedule may be. They may have plans and, it may be a short agenda, which might be okay. I just, want to let you know. I mean, I haven't talked, the manager and I have talked briefly about it, but a lot of people are out that week before. Because remember, I'm just saying, so, I mean, look, I work wherever.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're saying is if we have meetings that are scheduled 2 weeks apart, we have this meeting on Tuesday, and then the way we have it set up is staff has to have all their information in by Friday of this week for a week. There's a week and a half turnaround on a meeting. Is that accurate?
Right. So, for example, today's meeting on the 10th, the agenda went out the Wednesday before, so the 4th, and the staff deadline was the 29th.
But what was the policy in prior administrations?
Do you want to
Well, Jennifer, one of the things that
Well, Chad, has it always been this way?
No. Well, remember, the agendas also didn't go out on
They went
Wednesday.
on Thursday.
They went out on Thursday.
Right.
And there wasn't a real strict, hard deadline. I think Jenny in the manager's office,
More flexible.
it was more flexible. We would get things, throughout that up until that Wednesday of it, or right before it was going out.
Times on a Thursday.
But there's nothing, on your side, is there anything mandatory that you have to put on every agenda? Or it's there for you in order, if you need something from us, you can put it there. If you don't need it, it could just be a discussion meeting, a short meeting for us. I mean, I know that
That's what
there's
I
some
was
stuff that
getting
has
to,
to happen, but
'cause I feel like
there's
something here that could be common ground, which is if we want.
There are no action items that they need to bring to us. I'm fine.
You don't
with
need to
that.
bring anything
Yeah,
to
they don't
us.
need to bring, or if you say my action items can't go on until a subsequent
28.
meeting, that's fine. But I think I would like us to be able to talk more.
And listen to the community
and listen to
things like
people.
that.
I tried to, in coming up with the schedule, which was difficult, I tried to at least leave 3 weeks in between.
Right,
So
I know
that's
you
why
did.
there is sometimes a long gap because there's a holiday or spring break or something in the way. So that's why I tried my best to allow for 3 weeks when I could, to allow more time to put together the agenda.
Jennifer, on an issue that I thought we had crossed, speaking of the Bible, is that, it's not necessary and it's also a waste of money and resources, and the most important resources, which is your time and your staff, big staff time, is all these unnecessary legal documents, contracts that we don't need to read. If you do, take 5-10 minutes of your day and come and read one copy instead of having her make 10 copies of what becomes a frightening Bible.
It's a lot more than 10
And
copies.
hopefully we can do that. I know that Ed London, who's not here, so I said, well, I want to see. Well, come and see it. But these are the little things that make a difference in being efficient.
Respectfully,
And-
I'm with Ed on this. I like to mark up documents, so I like to have it in front of me, make my notes on
But
it.
then
so-
you go and, why can't you go to a reading room?
Because I like to mark it up. I like to have it and mark up legitimately the contract. I'll make notes in the contract.
So you
saying-
are managing.
I'm for my comments on the contract. Yeah, if I have questions or something else, yeah, I put them in.
Yeah, we
document.
definitely have a major difference in having been at the creation here. Well, no, I mean, I think this is not government by either mayor or council. This is government by manager, and we are the policymakers, and we're not into doing things. And we're not into reviewing a 50-page contract. That's why we have capable legal hands. And we're not into questioning the request from the police department because they're professionals and we have to have a trust in the people we hire. And it's just, we're going way over the managing, and it's reflected on minutes. They are politely saying what I am vociferously saying, the two professionals, three, that this kind of schedule is a burden on them. And they don't have the freedom that I have to say it, but that's what they're sort of saying. And we need to be sensitive to that because we want to be very efficient with their time. And that's why I don't have enough. Let me tell you something. Personally, I will make the time. So just to make sure you're all clear, I'll come every week if you want. But it's not the way we're supposed to be functioning. So it's not that I don't want to come to meetings. We just need to balance our managing of this administration through our professionals. That's all. It is, and it's not easy, black and white. I know that there's a gray area here. And the biggest one is our ability to communicate with each other because of sunshine. But I
have
think
a question, Mike.
Certainly.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's okay. I'm sorry.
We had discussed, it looks like you were interested in trying to get one additional meeting.
Right.
We had discussed this idea of potentially on April 7th, this community group thing turning into a real meeting and letting them present, basically be our special presentation section. And we could do that without adding the first meeting in January, which could impede on people's vacation.
I would be
And-
fine with that. My concern is, we're talking about, we've got an April deadline still with the Army Corps of Engineers. And so my thinking was
Okay.
to have it a little bit heavy toward the beginning so we can sort of follow up on the project. I understand what you're saying. I just think we need another project, another date. And if you want to make it the 7th and move that the community group budget
Well, I
workshop
would
somewhere
include
else
it, I would include the community group presentations, basically,
in the same day.
in the April 7th meeting.
Okay.
And then we'd have a meeting with the community group presentations
That's fine
as
by me.
our.
I wouldn't have
Can
any
I just play
problem.
devil's advocate?
No.
You don't, okay.
I'm kidding. Go ahead.
My fear in doing that is taking into account what Councilmember Laredo said and the experience that we had this past budget workshop. I don't want the nice feeling we used to have when they came to present and they got like sort of special time, and it was almost like and not that it was unlimited time, but there was no pressure, and it was, I always felt that it was a very positive experience to go through, and it made me proud to be part of the community, to have these people come and to hear it. And if we squeeze them in at the beginning of a meeting with a big agenda, and who knows what's on there and who's here to make public comments because they're upset about something on the agenda, I'm afraid of it spoiling that experience. I would rather do those community groups, I'm sorry it's another meeting, but I would rather do them as a separate workshop on a different day, even if it's only a 2-hour meeting, an hour and a half, whatever it takes. I want to be able to give those groups the time and the atmosphere that I think they deserve.
They used to do it on the
Budget
During the
workshop.
workshop.
But
So-
if you remember, the budget workshop, the budget part of it shrunk to like nothing because we spent the whole time, it was like a community group workshop. We didn't have much time to really go through
You mean this year?
budget. No, I mean, like,
Oh,
John.
right,
Prior
okay,
years it's been-
okay.
I mean,
Got it.
that's why I really like the idea of breaking it out into its own group.
Okay.
Vice Mayor?
I like the idea of breaking it out. I still think April 7th, 2.5 months before the time we get to the budget, is way too far. And we're going to be like, what group does what again? And who's doing? I think it should be right the meeting right before. So if we're going to separate that or whatever we want to do, I would move the community groups to somewhere between June 9th and June 23rd, somewhere in there.
16th.
And it would be a short meeting. I mean, I know how these goes. It's an hour and 15 minutes. We listen and maybe call it a presentation, just community presentations, and have them all present to us. Thank you very much. If we have a couple questions, we can ask why they're there. and we leave, we don't make any decisions, and then we
still
come.
fresh in our
And it
minds.
It's fresh
wouldn't
in
be
our
any
minds.
burden on the staff either,
Right,
because it's
exactly, because it's
literally
just the
community
groups coming in
presentation.
and
Just
giving their
community groups.
presentation.
So it's
Fine.
no. So you want to move the April 7th meeting to a council meeting?
Yeah, make it a council meeting.
Are
and
you
then-
still proposing that January 14th?
No, we can
be
pull
made?
the January 14th. I mean,
All right, I will. I will make the motion then that we make April 7th a council meeting. We move the community group presentation workshop to June 16th. Is the one right before?
Yes.
You could do 23 minus.
What was the date that you had suggested on the public safety?
Initially, it was January 14th.
So we'll put that there.
So we could remain with that
Yeah.
date.
If I may, though, to Councilmember, Vice Mayor Moss, with regard to the community group presentation, although this wasn't my idea to do it here, I don't mind it because it also gives you your 6-month check-in. It's half the year. So the idea of getting feedback from the community groups, what are they up to? How are things working? Are they satisfied? It can serve two purposes. It's the 6-month check-in reflecting on here's what we've done, here's where we are, and this is what we're expecting next year is my first point. My second point, if you move their workshop back that close to the June 23rd workshop, that doesn't give us enough time to figure out how we're going to fund their request and incorporate it in the material for the 23rd.
But you don't know because we haven't done the workshop yet. So we have to tell you what we like, what we don't like, what we want to have in there based on what you're
But
going to
how
present.
am I going to, if I
Well,
do
you can
it,
present to us a budget that's over, and we have to figure out how to make it fit.
so whatever they present on whatever they do,
I
we
would include
include
it
it
all.
as is.
Under the old style, they were presenting it on June 23rd. You weren't knowing what they were doing. You- they were
Exactly.
giving you
Right,
next-
this,
so-
like I said,
That was her reason for putting it there, probably.
Yeah, but I don't. For me, it's not important to get a 6-month check-in or a 9-month check-in. I really don't care. I mean, if
Okay.
they give us a check-in 2 months later, it really makes no difference to us. I mean, at least we're just getting the information. So I agree with you. We could do that. But for it happening on April 7th versus
I'll
June,
second
doesn't
your
really
change.
matter.
Actually,
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm okay with everything that's been said, but I had a question. Manager, I think you and I had a conversation that there was a reason you wanted the community group.
yes. So
In
we have
April?
a very detailed budget calendar that outlines certain deliverables for the whole process to work more smoothly. And the deadline we had for the community board, I'm sorry, the community group expenditure requests, we had requested by April 17th. So this date would allow them to present. If there is any feedback, it would allow us to take their material and then roll it into our budget by that date.
So the,
We'll have to audible on that.
okay.
Well, it's not that. It's just that there's
That's
no.
the process you suggested.
Right, but you're thinking there was some type of decision being made at the April 7th.
I
of who's
think-
gonna- Okay, so it makes no difference if it's on April 7th or June 16th.
Just to the extent that we can incorporate what the ask is into what our plan is.
But they'll have already submitted it, right?
Yeah, they're going to submit in April, so you'll know.
We could adhere to that. We could adhere to their making the request to us on the 17th. We include it at face
May
value,
1, I mean,
and then
whatever
they
it is.
present it to you
Perfect.
a little bit out.
And then they present to us fresh, so when we go in there, we know what it
May
is.
1. Make it a May 1 presentation.
Our
We
legal
also work
counsel,
with them.
how do we manage the Charter 3 absence based on 11 question?
I'm not sure that anyone's ever raised that issue.
Right, but it's because we have to read the charter every once in a while.
You mean the 3
Well,
All right, well, let's
You're-
just,
I mean,
I'm sorry, let's focus on this issue ahead of us. We've got a meeting scheduled.
No,
up
but the
for-
question is, we have in the charter, 11 meetings, of which if you miss 3, you're kicked out.
Yep.
And so my question is, as per the
Excused.
charter, now if we're up to 16, how does that work? I don't know.
Well, it's only
Well,
12 regular
the
meetings.
charter says at least 11
Right.
Yes.
meetings.
At least.
And I think,
So it applies to no matter what number?
hold on, I want to read.
Yeah,
the
it's okay.
charter
It's
version
an
that
issue
you're-
you need to look up so we don't get.
And what is the mindset for the 2 meetings in October? Because other than this, we're pretty much going every month now.
I think because it's 2 months between, if you don't have the October 13th, there's 2 months between meetings. You've had-
No, you would have like if the October 27th, I guess, would be the one I was wondering why we're having.
No, I think at the time, it was just sort of, I was trying to get us a meeting, and you can't do it during the summer. We're jammed up in September. I actually thought maybe.
Well, you have a big gap through all the hearings. You have nothing being
Right.
done all September, so it's August 25th.
September 29th, maybe.
There's maybe a lot of things that we need to do and catch up.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely are going to have to catch up. It's just a matter of how you program those two meetings. Do you want to move it up to October 6th and October 20th?
No, I wasn't thinking that. I was just trying to
Because we're
kind
going
of
to
be
have, I
consistent
would assume we'll have a lot of things that we'll want to get going on for the budget.
after the budget.
Yeah, for the budget, yeah, as the budget's already been.
Our biggest responsibility is the budget.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, because that sets policy. And last year, you admitted that you misjudged the time frame, and that brought about some issues that we all regret. Are you comfortable? This proposal come from whom, this dates, from you or from?
At this point, it's been.
No, I mean, I'm
collective.
trying to see how you can be efficient, particularly as we go towards the budget, which at the end of the day is the bottom line here.
So.
Do you want to change something?
I mean, one thing we could think about is that the property appraiser actual taxable, the
It's
final
July
taxable
1st.
values don't come out till July 1st. So I don't know if there's an appetite for doing a meeting at that point when I'll actually have real revenue
No,
numbers.
July 7th is a Tuesday, so that.
Why don't we just call a special meeting if we need it?
Right.
Well,
Set
so
the
you would
Yes.
take away the June 23rd meeting?
That's
How are you going to have a budget meeting without the income side?
We always do. That's what we've
Not-
done.
It's
It.
not
always
best
do.
practice.
We've always done it.
What we can do is it's a preliminary. It's a preliminary
That's
budget.
not a good reason. I can see it in his face. It's just because we did.
No, but what we could do is have.
I mean, really, that's not a.
No, I understand. No, I agree.
But we're not going to have a meeting on July 7th. That's the next Tuesday after July 1st. July 1st is a Wednesday, so you're talking July 7th is a Tuesday. Nobody's going to be around. You're not going to get a quorum on July 7th, so that's not pragmatic.
Well, we're all here right now.
Should we set it?
I think to have a budget hearing without your income side, I don't know where I'm coming. It doesn't make sense to me, but I can stand corrected. I mean,
My preference would be that we have the July 1 numbers. It's
Yeah,
difficult.
it's-
Do you want to move the workshop to July 7th?
or it doesn't have to be
I
the
do know
7th.
I
Or
will
the
not be
14th.
You won't be here.
I can't be
Or
here.
it could be
Yeah, nobody's
you-
going to, yeah.
July at all?
I could do middle of August on better. But July and beginning of August are tough.
Yeah, I mean, it's just not, historically,
The middle of July, no? 14th. It doesn't have to be a Tuesday.
No, but you're gone, right? You're automatically, I mean,
Well, I mean, I don't know exactly what I'll do this summer, but I know that week I'll be out of the country.
yeah, I've got, so. I think we leave the,
So we will have a budget hearing.
No,
on
we're having a
expen-
budget workshop.
Budget on expenditures only.
essentially, that's what we're doing.
Well, we'll have a draft of what we.
It's really more,
They
but it
give
should
us
be
an
about
idea.
capital. Capital, what we're talking about, what we have to start looking at. You're right, we would like a harder number that we get, but even the July 1 number is never
Yeah,
accurate.
but we get a preliminary number from them before
June 1.
that
June
one,
1.
and
We get a
and they get
preliminary
and it's
number.
pretty
Right, but July
close.
1
I mean, it's not that they don't move that much off of each other.
My point to you, manager, is don't be shy now to suggest to us the changes to make you more efficient. And going to the budget is the decision we have to make.
Right, I
So
think.
let that rule us rather
Right.
than we
I
pick.
think having the community group, a dedicated workshop for them, for their peace of mind, for the sense of community, for your peace of mind, makes a lot of sense. So I think whenever you want to do that, if you want to make the 7th a regular meeting and move it closer to the June date, I'm fine with that. I am also fine with doing a meeting on January 14th. I can tell you our work plan, as of now, we don't have anything actionable, but that's fine too. That's
Right, I mean,
fine too.
I think you're saying we may have the beach numbers. The beach report may be January 6th, correct?
That's what the
So,
notice to proceed
I
with.
mean, that's really prime.
So is
the
there an
first
expectation
third-
then?
Well, I'd like to be able to discuss it with the council and sort of get some feedback. Hopefully, somebody from the firm Moffett would be here and be able to talk to us about it and explain it to us.
But the 14th, then you would also have the workshop on
The town
public
hall.
safety.
I didn't realize that date
Town
was
hall,
set.
and
I
we
don't
could do
think they
that
can
on the
be on the same
16th.
date.
No, I think that, to your point, is it should be a separate date so that people can talk. That's not a date. We do workshops in town halls outside. This is for council meeting schedule.
And I think if you need to have, we can have a pretty good budget workshop with the preliminary numbers, but if the numbers have changed or you need something from us and you need to have a meeting, I mean, maybe we just have a special meeting sometime in July when everybody can get together to adjust anything that you need to adjust. What I don't want is that you have too short of a time from the time we do the workshop to the time that we actually get to our budget hearing, and it's too compressed because nobody can meet until the end of July, and now you're
Which is what
losing
happened this year.
Exactly. So I want
And
to
she
make sure that we
corrected
don't
it.
have
She
that.
said that she needed to correct her scheduling, and that's why I'm trying, for the fourth time, trying to turn to her to make sure she's comfortable.
Yeah.
Well,
But I think in recognizing that and in fairness to the manager, she was not ready at the budget workshop as ready as she would have liked to have been. And
Right.
do you feel that if you had a full budget, albeit a draft, and numbers needing to be tweaked when we get real numbers, if you could have developed a full budget by that date,
Yeah,
would you
so
be
we've,
okay?
we've backed into a calendar. Actually, this Friday is our first staff retreat on next year's budget. So we've backed into a timeline so that by the June 23rd date, we can have some preliminary, although it will be off the preliminary roll, and it typically doesn't change by more than 1% to 4%. So, it's not ideal, but we can manage, and we've worked to accommodate, we can accommodate that.
Weren't we discussing having another strategic retreat also?
Yes, so
that's a different issue. That's not a meeting schedule. Let's do that.
No, but it needs to be considered, obviously, if we're looking at our schedule for next year.
Well, right, but we're looking at
Okay.
the meeting schedule. You know
Let's
what I
get
mean?
back to the meeting.
Let's just get the
So
meeting.
there's a motion on the floor right now, the April 7th to be a council meeting and the 16th of June to be the community group presentation.
Right. So there's no, I mean, is there an appetite for a January 14th meeting? If there isn't,
Discuss
I
the
will
beach
to
stuff
discuss
and-
the beach stuff and have that discussion. There
Is
does,
something going to change between the 14th and the 28th, and is that
I
time
don't know.
sensitive?
Well, I don't know. That's the problem. We won't know. Yes, ma'am.
Suggestion,
We also have the 21st.
can we
We're
do
gonna-
January 16th, also a town hall meeting for the beach
On
presentation?
the 16th. Oh, we could do that. On the 14th or
Two
the 16th?
town halls, it's not a special, it's
Do them
not,
both at the same day?
no.
No, 2 different days. The
Two different
14th and
days,
16th.
one on
Days apart in the
Tuesday,
same week?
Okay.
two town hall meetings.
Yeah,
I
sounds good.
understand, but
Why not?
I'm just trying to
Help.
help.
For information, right?
Well, yeah, one
right.
is about the
Now we're
beach.
just-
which
Let's
I
call-
think is
let's
important,
say
and
let's
one is
call-
about the beach.
Oh, why don't we
the
do them
public
back
policy.
to back? Just do one town hall with two topics.
No, I think that's too much. That's too much, because you don't know how long, to Councilmember Laredo's point, the police policy could be a long engaged
Two
with
different
the public and the beach, I think.
crowds.
Can I make a suggestion? I think you guys have a pretty firm commitment on your year here. I think these additional meetings, you guys can discuss them. You're talking about stuff in June. I mean, you guys can have the manager have a better idea when these are going to be ready, and she can come and set that meeting.
All right, if I want to, yeah, you know what, let's,
Let's call the question, the
call the
motion.
question on your motion.
You guys need it reread or you're good?
What was it?
My motion?
April 7th will be a regular meeting, June 16th will be the community group budget workshop.
And that's it.
And those are-
January 14th.
Is not a date.
It's not part of our
It's not part
meetings.
of anything right now.
And the workshop on the public safety is on.
We haven't.
Separate.
That's separate.
That's a separate issue we're going to take up after we get this done, because we also have the strategic workshop.
Who seconded the motion?
I second the,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And this is with the knowledge that we can cancel a meeting if we don't think we
yeah,
need
if
the
we
meeting.
can, or if we want to call a meeting, a special meeting, because we have other things that come up, but.
We do.
Can I have now the consensus of council for the January 14th town hall meeting and possibly January 16th? Or,
14th
Or
was-
earlier, I mean. whatever.
I'm okay with the beach
We can hold
report
off
happening
until
on the
re-
28th. I
Okay,
don't think,
That's fine.
I
Let's see
mean,
what comes.
unless there's something that
And
comes
when, as
up
soon as
that's
anything
time
comes out,
sensitive.
we can
Fine.
notify you
Yeah.
as we do.
It's
As we
just a
do.
presentation of the final report?
No,
No, we
no,
don't.
it's-
So
no,
the
it's a-
notice to proceed required that they have the conceptual benefit cost
Right,
benefit cost analysis done by January 6th.
Okay.
but I think it's,
So
So if
He'll
there's
send it to
something
us anyways.
emergency, we could have
so
that
The
decision prior
but
to
the
a
decision
meeting.
point, like that won't be conclusive as to whether or not we participate in the federal shore protection. That decision by the Army Corps is not
April.
until April.
So the town hall on police policy and procedure
14th.
for the January 14th. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Anything else?
Strategic.
Motion to adjourn.
So the strategic
Oh,
plan.
strategic, sorry, I take it back. I take it
According
back.
to our work plan, we had anticipated somewhere between February 3rd and 14th for the council's strategic planning retreat,
3rd and
between February 3rd and 14th.
When is President's Day weekend?
Probably the 10th.
17th. So how
Oh,
about
it
the
is?
8th?
Oh, yeah.
February 8th,
That's a what?
That's Saturday.
Saturday? Or do you want to do a Sunday?
Saturday's better than Sunday. Yeah, because February 8th, is that Super Bowl? You crazy?
No, the 3rd is Super Bowl, isn't it?
No, it can't be.
Or second, the second.
It's daylight
First.
savings time.
It's the second. It's the second. I have it here.
Okay, right.
February what?
Okay.
8th.
February 8th is fine. Yes.
Right in your window, Andrea.
Wait, I'm not sure.
Does that work?
I don't
That
have
works.
another calendar I have to check.
That works, thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Any way you can get this
Motion to adjourn. Adjourn.
Tomorrow morning.